Number 10. Emma Frost. She's probably the biggest name on this list. It almost feels like everyone knows her powers, but someone suggested her in the comments, and well, she's awesome. Emma Frost possesses telepathic abilities on a similar level to Charles Xavier. She's been referred to as an Omega-class telepath and has demonstrated the ability to stalemate Exodus and overcome telepaths such as Nate Gray and Rachel Summers through greater experience and skill. With her telepathy, Emma Frost can create psionic shields, telepathic cloaking, telepathic illusions. She can absorb information and upload information into others. Emma can project one's astral form from their body onto the astral planes or the physical planes. She can inhibit others' powers, induce pain, erase a person's memories, and heal mental trauma through psychic surgery. She has intuitive multilingualism, mind control, can create mental links, induce mental paralysis and sedation. She can alter others' minds, cause a kind of mental amnesia. She can telepathically detect and track others, not to mention produce psionic blasts and psionic lightning. And that's not mentioning her secondary mutation of a diamond form. This grants her super durability, strength, and stamina, as well as psychic immunity, but at the cost of her psychic powers. Number 9. Black Tom Cassidy. Black Tom Cassidy is the cousin of Sharon Cassidy, who's Banshee, and he was originally a longtime crime partner to the villain Juggernaut, but his powers are interesting to say the least. Originally, his mutant power was bio-organic thermokinetic blasts, generating concussive blasts of force through any wooden medium. Normally, it was forgive my pronunciation, a shillilag, which is a traditional Irish wooden fighting stick. Tell me if I messed it up in the comments, please. After a fight with Cable, doctors grafted a wood-like substance onto his wounds, healing him and allowing him to channel his bioblast directly through his fists. But as a result of a genetic virus, the substance spread over Tom's whole body, turning him into a Groot-like looking dude, which actually worked to his benefit as the secondary mutation gave him plant growth, allowing him to grow to immense size, superhuman strength, a healing factor, chlorokinesis, which is control over plant life within his vicinity. He could distribute his consciousness among plants he controlled, and Cassidy could drain the life force of organic beings. He eventually returned to a human form, but kept the capacity to control plants to a limited degree, mainly focusing his powers on wood specifically, and using the energy channeling aspect of his powers, he could increase his striking power to generate protective shielding. Number 8. Sebastian Shaw. Sebastian Shaw is a mutant that you'll probably best recognize for being the Black King of the Hellfire Club, or the guy who somehow took out Darwin in the X-Men First Class movie. I still think that was dumb. His powers are actually a bit different from that movie though. Shaw has the ability to absorb energy, specifically all forms of kinetic energy directed at him, and use it to enhance his strength, speed, and stamina. This includes physical damage such as that sustained in battle, and kinetic blasts such as Cyclops' optic blast or Gambit's explosions. That's why you'll sometimes see him punching walls, being hit by his own underlings, or allowing himself to be hit by his foes in order to build up more and more of the kinetic energy to empower himself. He can also absorb and use other forms of energy such as electricity and magical energy, as shown in Avengers Academy when fighting Hercules. He can build up and store this energy and release it whenever he chooses. His biggest power, however, comes in the form of being such a powerful and influential figure in the Hellfire Club. Number 7. Manifold. Originally, Manifold was thought to be a teleporter, but his powers are much more than just teleportation. Eden actually has the ability to communicate with the universe and kind of ask it for certain things, and in turn the universe would change and mold to do what he wanted. So for teleportation, for example, he's actually kind of creating the Einstein-Rosen bridge and folding space to allow himself, or whatever he wants, to be teleported from wherever he is to wherever he wants. It's the same thing when he creates portals. He's used the ability to fold space around him to make him appear invisible, and he can even fold space around beings and things, like when he teleported a bit of the sun's plasma to his hand and folded space around it so it wouldn't be able to hurt him, which is a crazy thought. Even though this ability only works in his native reality, it seems like potentially an incredibly powerful ability. Number 6. La Bandera. First appearing in Wolverine Volume 2 number 19 in the December of 1989, La Bandera is said to be the daughter of a supporter of Fidel Castro, and her mutant ability is basically to be an awesome leader, which in turn apparently powers her secondary mutation. So her first mutation is as an empath, able to influence the emotions of others, which she mainly used to inspire people to fight against oppression. And then in turn, the amount of followers she had would power her energy projection powers, which she would channel through her staff. So if she has no followers, then there's no energy projection. But if she's using her empath abilities properly, then she should always have followers, right? She began fighting dealers, who she followed to the South American country of Tierra Verde, which at that point was ruled by a harsh and corrupt dictator. She teamed up with Wolverine to fight the dictator, but unfortunately she passed away at the hands of Zeitgeist in 1995 and hasn't really been talked about since, like, at all. Number 5. Blindfold. It's interesting that Blindfold wears a blindfold, as she was born with no eyes or eye sockets for her to blind with a fold. But don't think being unable to see is some kind of handicap. Blindfold is wildly powerful. Blindfold's powers are psychically based and are strongest in telepathy and wielding astral energy, which she can make solid to do a number of things, including creating armor, weapons, force fields, and energy blasts, and using it to cast her astral projections into the physical world. Using her telepathy, sometimes in conjunction with the astral plane and its energies, Ruth is capable of astral travel, psychometry, precognition, retrocognition, clairvoyance, psychic possession, mental influence, and she even has some chaos manipulation. She also has a degree of telepathic resistance, meaning telepaths can't read her mind, but they can still possibly attack it and possess it and all that fun stuff. And in at number 4 is Destiny. After talking about Ruth, it seems like a logical shift to talk about her possible great-grandmother, Irene Adler. Irene Adler, otherwise known as Destiny as a mutant, has a long history going all the way back to the 19th century, and she was even in a relationship with Mystique all the way back when. While she has her eyes, unlike Blindfold, Irene is indeed physically blind. But it's okay, as she could still see the future. That's because Destiny has the mutant power of precognition, able to mentally scan the probability spectrum of alternate futures, and by concentrating, she could focus on only the most probable alternate futures. She could scan the alternate futures that existed from 1 second away up until those that existed 15 minutes away, but she could be 97% accurate if her predictions were 10 seconds away or less, allowing her to basically see what she was doing even though she couldn't see what she was doing. Number 3. Emma Steed. Emma Steed is actually the Black Queen of the London Hellfire Club. If you are noticing a lot of Hellfire Club members here, that's because there are a lot with very cool powers and not a lot of people know much about them at all. For example, Emma Steed here has a rare form of telepathic power called psionic skinning. This basically allows Emma to create blades of pure psionic energy to attack and disable her foes. These blades aren't purely for physical attack. They actually allow her to do a number of things like warping the minds of people, igniting pain sensors, destroying physical portions of their brain, and destroying psionic forms or astral projections. Using this ability, she was able to de-life the Shadow King, who is an incredibly powerful telepath. As a secondary result of her powers, she is basically immune to any type of psionic or telepathic attack, with her presence being absolutely destructive to telepaths. Number 2. Kora of the Burning Heart. Can we just get an applause for literally the coolest name ever? Like, Kora of the Burning Heart. That's awesome. Kora of the Burning Heart is a mutant from Morocco where she served as an assassin and primarily used her power only to boost her own abilities in battle, thanks to the Iraqi being really stubborn, honor-bound fighters. But Kora's abilities can indeed help others as well. Kora's heart is an internalized combustion furnace, which generates life force energy. Thanks to that energy, she gets this really awesome looking flaming skeletal appearance, and she uses this constant energy source to give herself incredible physical capabilities, as well as boost up the powers of others around her to even greater heights. She was a member of the X-Terminators alongside Cable, and she is also a part of Sword. Also, Kora of the Burning Heart. Sorry, just wanted to say it again. Super cool. Number 1. Amelia Vaught. Amelia was a mutant born with the ability to transubstantiate solid matter into vapor that she can control, and honestly, it's such a great ability. Seeing the things she can do with this ability is really cool. I said she can transubstantiate matter, and that is including herself and other people. When she turns herself into vapor, she is obviously unharmed by physical attacks, but can then fly through the air as vapor and pass through small holes or cracks. cracks, but the vapor is still physically there, which means she can still move objects as vapor. She has also turned her allies into vapor to get them out of dangerous situations, substantiating them beside her. And she's even stolen weapons off of enemies, turning them into vapor, which she then reformed in her own hands. But wait, there's more. Using the astral plane, Amelia is able to transport herself and anything else across the surface of the globe in an instant, even summoning distant people to herself by teleportation, converting them into mist and then bringing that mist into her presence to be reformed. It's just super cool. Number 10. Arty. Arthur Arty Maddox is an interesting one. His mutant abilities manifested when he was just 11 years old, leaving him disfigured and mute, but granting him the very interesting ability of visual telepathy. This means that Arty can connect to his or others' thoughts, and he can project those thoughts as psionic holograms or pictograms. This is really useful for Arty, specifically as he is a mute, but at the same time, I gotta say I think that regular telepathy would kind of be a bit more useful, and I don't know. Doesn't matter, because Arty's power is more cool, because he can even make large-scale holograms and use them in battle, usually for defense. But Arty can also perform something called a mind lock that allows him to paralyze someone physically or mentally. I kinda hope he keeps evolving his powers, but we'll see. Number 9. I Scream. I Scream, that's I, like this, or Scream, like is a villain of the X-Men who decided he needed to destroy the X-Men using their danger room. He actually got pretty far in that plan too, and he was able to overload Cerebro, taking down Professor X temporarily. Now I'm going to assume he did that by giving the device a brain freeze, because if you hadn't guessed, Ice Scream can turn into any flavor of ice cream, and then everyone screams for Ice Scream's ice cream. No, that's not true, sorry. But using his abilities, he was able to enter the X-Men's mansion and the danger room before Xavier came back too and lowered the temperature in there, freezing Ice Scream's ice cream form, which is when a clown turned him into a banana split and split from the scene. Just go read Anoxio the Clown from 1983, you'll get it. Make sure you guys check out the other videos in this series and drop a like on this video to show us your support. Number 8. Peeper. Peeper, or Peter Quinn, first appeared in Captain America Annual number 4 in May 1977 as part of Magneto's new Brotherhood, a brotherhood of verbally based villains: Slither, Shocker, Lifter, Burner, and Peeper. Seems like a bit of lazy writing over at Marvel to me, but this group actually went under a couple different names under a couple different leaders, including Mandrill and the Red Skull. Peeper though is definitely the most interesting of the bunch, and he's also more relevant as he has appeared recently as part of Abigail Brand's sub-team called the Six. On this team, Peeper played the role of the Eye, using his abilities to examine Chiron or Kerbon particles. That's because Peeper has the gift of telescopic, microscopic, and X-ray vision using his enlarged eyes, but he also had an offensive ability in the form of yellow or red concussive optic blasts. He also seems like a decent dude, despite usually being a villain. Number 7. Brew. Saying that a mutant is unique kind of feels redundant, as most mutants have pretty unique abilities from others of their kind, but Brew is even more unique as he is not a mutant of the human race. Instead, Brew is a mutant of the incredibly violent and parasitic insectoid alien race known as the Brood. This essentially means he can actually feel compassion and friendship, and he was born separately from the Brood hive mind, meaning he is not loyal to a Brood queen. He also possesses super genius levels of intelligence, making him one of the smartest students at Jean Grey's School for Higher Learning. So, Brew's X gene mutation is only really mental or psychological in nature, but being a brood, he brings natural body armor and fanged jaws to a fight, and recently, Brew actually consumed a king egg, making him king of the entire brood species, including the brood queens. Number 6. Big Bertha. Bertha Crawford, originally Ashley Crawford until she changed her name, had the mutant ability of total control over her body's physical size and mass. mass. She can add or take away hundreds of pounds to herself at will, controlling her figure. This allowed her to become the highest paid fashion model in America at one point, but also allowed her to don the Big Bertha superhero persona. Using her abilities to add bulk and mass, she actually increases her durability and her strength to a peak of lifting 50 tons, allowing her to jump huge distances like the Hulk. No matter what size Bertha alters herself to though, she has a high level of athleticism. Ashley rebranded herself into a plus size model, which is when she changed her name to Bertha, and you know what? She still kinda killed it. Good job. Number 5. Decimus Furious. Decimus Furious actually began his life all the way back in ancient Rome, where his mother and father took their own lives, leaving Decimus homeless on the streets. In 281 AD, on the cusp of the afterlife due to his hunger, his mutant powers activated. This gave him super strength and durability, alongside an extremely bestial form similar to like a minotaur, but almost as if it was made of stone. He's really super cool looking, honestly. But his more powerful ability would be empathic war infection. This basically means that Decimus can infect anyone who he strikes with a thirst for war, which will send them into a rage-filled state. It also acts as a defensive tool against telepaths who try to read or control his mind, causing the war infection to overcome the telepath. He has also been shown to be able to piece himself back together after being blown up, which is funny because he blew up when Phantom X made him feel love, which did not compute, and he just went boom. He became Apocalypse's final horseman of war. Number 4. Warpath. James Proudstar is the younger brother of John Proudstar, also known as Thunderbird, and he always idolized his brother, but in that idolization he actually limited his own powers to a degree. Mostly, his mutation boosts up his physical capabilities, granting him super strength that has had various different levels, once having Hulk levels of strength, but another time struggling to fight an alligator. He can run at 100 miles per hour, and his stamina allows him to exert himself for 24 hours without rest. He can withstand a hell of a lot more than a regular human, like falling several stories or being hit with energy blasts. His agility and reflexes are increased to the point of dodging bullets, and his senses allow him to see in the dark and hear sounds other humans can't. After some training with Pete Wisdom, Warpath has shown the ability of self-propelled flight and a regenerative healing factor. What's really interesting is that while working with Ghost Rider, James gained shamanistic abilities like perceiving spirit energy. He's also probably one of the best mutant combatants, whether it's unarmed or armed with his vibranium daggers. Number 3. Gideon. I believe Gideon here is the first external to make this list. The externals include immortal mutants like Selene and Apocalypse, but they all share a psychic link which separates them from other immortal characters. Gideon was born during the 15th century, and aboard Christopher Columbus's first expedition, he actually succumbed to scurvy, and his life was changed forever when he resurrected and gained his mutant abilities. Like all externals, Gideon is immortal and no longer ages. He can also resurrect himself, as confusing as that sounds since he's immortal, but unique to him is the ability of power mimicry, giving himself the powers, advanced skills, and talents of any being, android, or even battlesuit, and he's been able to gain the powers of 3 people at once. But more than that, his powers allow him to fully understand how to use that other person's powers to the point that he can even overcome the original user of said power. Number 2. Cipher. Cipher, or Doug Ramsey, has omnilingual translation abilities, and considering that communication is an essential part of our everyday lives, whether that be with other humans, devices, or even our own selves, I'd say he's pretty powerful. He can translate language of literally any origin, even alien. He can read and decipher codes, including computer code, as well as read body language, subtext, and unspoken intention. More recently, everything he sees is interpreted as information, meaning he basically kind of just reads life. He can read body language to the extent he is able to predict people's moves before they make them. He can learn and perform spells for magic users, and he even created his own overly complex language that makes him immune to psychic mind reading. But Doug actually merged with Warlock, essentially giving Doug techno-organic shapeshifting abilities on top of everything else. And for our number 1 spot, we are going to talk about my #1 favorite X-Men, Nightcrawler. Kurt Wagner was first introduced in Giant Size X-Men #1 in April 1975, with the mutant ability to biophysically displace himself into the Brimstone dimension, travel through it with a subconscious sense, and then return back to our dimension in a different location, essentially teleporting. This all happens so fast it's almost instant, and it always is accompanied by the signature BAMF sound. Although he can teleport really far, even across the world more recently, he avoids teleporting to places he hasn't been before, or places he can't see, as he can accidentally end up appearing within solid matter, which could potentially end his life. Although he does have a small amount of spatial awareness that at least keeps his feet from teleporting into the ground, and he can even use the little demon things known as BAMFs as teleportation beacons that allow for teleportation to places he hasn't been before, even across dimensions. Through his unique physiology, he gains a few extra abilities as well, like a prehensile tail, microsuction hands and feet, and flexible bone structure, but he can also camouflage himself, bending light using the Brimstone dimension. But what a few might not know is that he actually became immortal thanks to the fact that recently he sacrificed his soul in heaven to come back to life, which is good because I never want to lose this legendary blue. In at #10 is Beltane. Beltane is a mutant you may likely not have heard of. Her real name is currently unknown, but we know she was part of a group of Romani gypsies. She was captured by the Latvarian monarch and awesome supervillain Dr. Doom and experimented on, which activated her latent mutant abilities, and also set off her desire to overthrow his rule with a group of other escapees. Now, Beltane's ability is the secret weapon of her group. She has the ability of fear projection, which means that she can physically project a manifestation of whatever the person she is facing most fears, psychically messing with and almost torturing her victims. So when fighting Wolfsbane, for example, Beltane made the hero see a projection of her not so nice father. Probably a mistake, as Wolfsbane eventually took her down in an animalistic rage, but hey, it's still a cool power. Coming in at #9, Wolfsbane. Speaking of Wolfsbane, Rain Sinclair has the mutant ability that I wish I had when I was a kid. She can turn herself into a wolf at will, and can even go into a transitional form that is basically a close to a werewolf without being a werewolf type of thing. In fact, she is basically a werewolf, but with none of the drawbacks of the monster. She retains all her faculties, minus not being able to talk and just being a little bit feral, and is not forced to change only at night. Rain grows much larger than her human form when she changes, and gains access to some enhanced strength, which, coupled with the body of a wolf, grants her enhanced speed and reflexes as well. She gains heightened senses similar to a wolf. The thing with Wolfsbane is that she is both a wolf and a human, so she gains the benefits of both, like almost stacking on top of each other. Unlike wolves, or humans for that matter though, she does have an enhanced healing factor and enhanced vision as well, so double thumbs up. #8, Abigail Brand. Abigail here is an interesting character. She is technically a human-alien hybrid, as her father hails from the planet Axis, but it's actually her human mother who Brand inherited her mutant abilities from, that allowed her to join S.H.I.E.L.D. and then Sword as an agent and hero. So what are said abilities? Well, she has a form of pyrokinesis known as tactile pyrokinesis, which means that Brand can coat at least her hands in flames that are potent enough to burn through most metals via tactile contact. She can use her abilities to warm up others, but has enough control that she can also set others on fire. So she has some versatility with said abilities. I somewhat kind of prefer her form of pyrokinesis because, I don't know, I just swear there are way too many fire-based heroes who seem to all do similar things. So at least Abigail has her own brand of fire. Sorry, the dad jokes are in full force today. #7, Jason Wingard. Jason Wingard, otherwise known as Mastermind, is basically an illusionist, but a very powerful one. He can psionically manipulate the senses of other people, causing them to see, hear, touch, smell, and or taste things which do not actually exist, or see, hear, touch, smell, and or taste real things in ways that they would not do naturally. So, For example, he can seem to make a solid wall appear in an empty space, or he can make himself look and sound like a different person, or look and feel like a wall, or even seem invisible. Since his power only affects the mind, his illusions cannot be recorded with cameras or anything like that, but his power is so strong that even if his victims know they are being subjected to an illusion, they will still react to the illusion as if it were reality, unless they can rid themselves of all suspicion that it is indeed reality, which sounds a little confusing. Basically, if Mastermind creates the illusion of a wall, most people, even if they know it's an illusion, will still be unable to walk through that wall. His most famous usage of his power, in my opinion, is when he attempted to manipulate Jean Grey, which led to that whole Dark Phoenix thing. Good job, dude. Number 6. Sunspot. Roberto da Costa is another mutant that a lot of people have heard of, especially in the more recent stories that have been coming out of Marvel. But that doesn't mean everyone knows his powers. Bobby da Costa's mutant ability allows him to store solar energy in his cells through a similar method to the way we store energy when we eat food. He can then release it when necessary to enhance his physical strength, usually with the side effect of his body being cloaked in darkness because he drains all the ambient light from his skin, which sounds really cool. The enhancements to his strength through this radiation have allowed him to knock down an alternate universe Hulk, even drawing blood and even restraining Gladiator of the Shi'ar. But other than his physical enhancements, he has also used the energy he absorbs to fly faster than light speed, use pyro and thermokinesis, firing blasts of heat and dark solar plasma, as well as using photokinesis directing light. He's also incredibly tricksy, displayed when he recently manipulated Iska the Unbeaten. I just love this character. Number 5. Trevor Fitzroy. Trevor here, who goes just by Fitzroy, is actually from Earth 1191. There, he was the illegitimate son of Anthony Shaw, the Black King of the Hellfire Club. Trevor's mutant ability was to drain other living beings of their life force, converting it into energy and absorbing it into himself, usually disintegrating his victims. With this life force, he can do a few different things, like opening temporal wormholes to travel across time and space, teleportation, shifting objects into different time frames, altering the flow of time to return people or objects to a previous incarnation, and freezing people in a type of stasis. The thing is, the usage of his power depends on the life force he absorbs. So for example, one wormhole would be equivalent to one person's life force. It's a little scary, to be honest. He did get a big power boost in the Bishop the Last X-Men series, where he tries to become time itself. He is a super cool and super dangerous character. Definitely check him out. Number 4. Harold Leland. Harold Leland was an alcoholic and obese corporate lawyer and also a mutant with the abilities to increase the mass or gravity of a person or object within his line of sight. He can use this ability to increase mass all at once or over time, slowly increasing the more a victim struggles. The power has shown to even break the ground beneath a target depending on the strength of that ground. So for example, there was a time that he sent Wolverine from inside the Hellfire Club all the way through the floor and the ground into the sewers. Also, the human targets would suffer great strain in their muscles, particularly in the heart, with the possibility of suffering physical damage. And if Leland uses his power on an item, that item could crumble if it wasn't particularly durable. Leland joined the Hellfire Club, an elite social club for the rich and wealthy located in New York's 5th Avenue, under Sebastian Shaw. He isn't the most impressive fighter, but his ability has come in handy more than a few times. Number 3. Phantom X. I honestly kinda dread talking about Phantom X, but I also completely love this guy. When I first read a comic with him in it, I did not fully understand his power, and I still don't really, so now I'm gonna try and explain something to you that I do not fully understand myself. Cool? Cool. So basically, Phantom X, or Charlie Cluster 7, or Weapon 13, or Jean-Philippe, if that's what you want to call him, was experimented on by Weapon Plus and was genetically grown and evolved using Sentinel technology. Thanks to this, he actually has, or had, 3 brains for independent parallel processing, nanoactive blood, and his primary nervous system is actually a detachable techno-organism called EVA, or EVA. So there's some stuff to unpack there. EVA, or EVA, can fly herself and can generate bioelectric charges to be used as weapons, with Phantom connects being both telepathically and symbiotically linked to Eva. His multiple brains allow him to think like a sort of supercomputer similar to Sage, but it also gives him access to 2 extra personalities, a charmer and a super deadly mutant hunter. He can create extremely powerful illusions and can enter a trance state where he can rapidly heal, and his self-supremacy over his body and mind allows him to overcome pretty much anything to complete his mission, including mind control. I can't talk too much more about him without taking forever, but know that he has enhanced senses, is a dope fighter, and does not create any kind of smell. Please look into this character and try to make sense of him, because I need help. Number 2. Somnus. Carl Valentino is actually a new member of Earth's mutants, first appearing in Marvel's Voices Pride #1 in June 2021. But canonically, he's been around for a while. He and Dakin actually had a one-night stand in 1967, a one-night stand in which Dakin dreamt of them having an entire life together, which caused Dakin to retrieve Carl's body in the modern day and bring it to Krakoa for revival. Except this dream was caused by Carl himself. That's because Somnus has the mutant power of Wannaromancy, which I'm almost certain I mispronounced, but I'm kind of proud of myself that I think I didn't. This means he has the ability to enter, broadcast, and even control dreams at will. He can render his opponents unconscious and is also able to bring others into his dreamscape. It's such a unique and interesting power, and it can allow him to live entire lifetimes within a dream, which in my nerd mind tells me he can learn and improve upon skills while dreaming, but don't take my word on that, I just kinda made that up. Only time will tell the multitude of ways his power shall be used in the future. Moving on to number 10 with Maro. Of all the mutant powers out there, I think the one I would actively try to avoid having, if that was how it works, is the abilities of Maro. Now Maro's actual mutant ability is a hyper-accelerated metabolism, and it's through this that she's able to do what most people know her for, accelerated bone growth. She has the ability to control the growth, shape, and toughness of her bone structure, even having it protrude from her body and be used as weapons that she can remove. She can also use this ability to create a sort of armor. Now the only problem, and the reason I wouldn't want it, is that it hurts when she does it, and just imagine how much that would hurt, having your bones protrude from your body. No thank you, I'll pass. Luckily, she has a very rapid healing factor that also gives her enhanced strength, agility, and reflexes, and as a little bonus, this girl has 2 hearts, which allowed her to actually survive when she had one pulled out. Nice. Number 9. Unice the Untouchable. Now, I gotta say the force field abilities of Wrestler, Criminal, and Villain Unice the Untouchable definitely have some major drawbacks. The positives are great. His force field can withstand blows from the Incredible Hulk. He can project his force field to move objects. He could also use the shield to be untouchable, hence the name, opening it up to be able to grab things and eat. Now, the drawback would come in the fact that there have been multiple times where Unice had his abilities increased, but to a point he couldn't even control his own abilities. At this time, his shield would literally close him off from everything. He couldn't grab things, eat food, or even breathe oxygen, which caused him to even pass out on one occasion, which luckily deactivated his powers, allowing him to actually live. Maybe if he used his powers for good, the writers would make him less self-destructive, but these are the cards you're dealt, bro. Guys, if you are indeed enjoying this video, do make sure to give it a little thumbs up. It's all you gotta do to let us know that you're enjoying what you're seeing. Thanks, nerds. Appreciate you. Number 8. Thumbelina. Are you getting tired of seeing all these super-powered beings who look like they just walked off a runway? Well, lucky for you, there is Christina Anderson, who goes by the moniker of Thumbelina. She's short, she's stout, she's slow, and she's always being made fun of. But she has a pretty useful mutant ability. Thumbelina can shrink down to 1/4 of an inch, making her an excellent candidate for missions of espionage with the Mutant Liberation Front. The best part about Thumbelina's powers, though, is that she retains her full-size strength in her miniature size, and has even been shown to actually increase in strength as she shrinks. So make fun of her all you want, but Thumbelina has proved instrumental to the Mutant Liberation Front team, even being the reason their first mission was such a success. Number 7. Strife. You know, a lot of the characters on these lists have come into contact with the character of Strife. And while most people do know how powerful Strife is, I think not including him on this far into this series is kind of a sin. So, Strife is actually a clone, created by Mother Ascani and taken by Apocalypse, a clone of Nathan Summers, whom most of you know as Cable. Strife is essentially what Cable could have been had he not been infected by the techno-organic virus that he needs to use his powers to constantly keep at bay. Without that limitation, just like Cable, Strife is an Omega level telekinetic, at least that's what he calls himself, and it's stated that he is the third most powerful one on Earth. He is able to do almost all of the other things telepaths of his level are capable of, plus powerful defensive and offensive telekinetic powers. But he is also cybernetically enhanced to have superhuman physical attributes thanks to Apocalypse. Strife is an incredibly powerful villain, not to be taken lightly at all. And at number 6 is Reaper. Pantu Hurageb has some interesting abilities to say the least. When he first appeared as part of Strife's Mutant Liberation Front, Reaper had the ability to generate a paralyzing effect on others that slowed their mobility and reaction times. He would usually use his scythe as a conduit for this ability, and it could even fully paralyze victims. But later, Reaper was enhanced by the Weapon X program, who gave him cybernetic prosthetic arms that could take different shapes, although you likely won't be surprised to hear they usually took the form of scythes that would still act as a conduit for his abilities. Unfortunately, Reaper did lose his abilities on M-Day, only to regain them again and then have them drained again. So he doesn't have any powers right now, I'm pretty sure. Or they're like diluted or something, I don't know. Number 5, Dragoness. For Tamara Kurtz, she was born a mutant directly because of the nuclear fallout caused by Hiroshima that her parents were exposed to, which is a different reason than a lot of other mutants, which to me makes her more interesting. She only debuted in 1990, so she's only been around for about 30 years, but she has certainly established herself as a powerful mutant so far, displaying the ability of bioelectricity generation, kind of like an eel. No, I'm just kidding. She's not like an eel. She usually uses this electricity in electrical blasts and pyrotechnic flares, which she used as part of Strife's Mutant Liberation Front. Since her introduction, she has also been seen as a vampire, after which she died and has since been revived, so she may or may not still be a vampire as well. I have no idea. Also, for a while she was equipped with these biotechnic pair of wings, which in the House of M were actually completely organic. I'd be stoked to see her show up again in comics and maybe expanded upon. I don't feel like there are many electricity-based mutants, so it'd be kinda cool. Number 4, Slab. A lot of you liked seeing Thumbelina in part 7 of this list, but what about her brother? Chris Anderson was a member of Mr. Sinister's Nasty Boys, and his life before this time isn't very well known. He has abilities similar to his sister. Where she can decrease in size, Slab has been shown to increase in size, getting stronger and more durable as he does so. Later on, he joined the Mutant Liberation Front, and even more recently than that, he has been seen on the Mutant Nation of Krakoa, where he went on to join up with Sword as part of their security division. Number 3, Vincente. He isn't really the most impressive of characters, although his abilities are certainly interesting, even if he usually gets defeated. On Earth 616, Vincente was a member of M-Plate's Hellions team. He had the ability to change his body from solid, liquid, or gas forms. Now, as a gas or liquid, he has been shown to be able to mix himself in with other materials and substances. So, for example, he once mixed himself in with some soup. Or, in the Age of Apocalypse world, he became wine inside a bottle. Over time, he further developed his abilities so that in his gas form, he could now render himself poisonous if inhaled. He was defeated twice, and since the last defeat, he hasn't really appeared more. Not yet at least, so let's cross our fingers and hope he shows up. Number 2, Skids. Sally Blevins, otherwise known as Skids, has a long history in Marvel Comics, being involved with many other mutant characters and teams from Magneto and Charles Xavier to the Morlocks and Exterminators. First introduced in X-Factor number 7 in August 1986, Skids' mutant ability is to create frictionless force fields that protect her from pretty much all physical attacks, falls, energy weapons, and projections. It can also allow her to kind of skate at a bit of speed given the frictionless nature of these force fields. She can also use her force fields to extend to others if she focuses. There was one really cool moment when she protected Avalon from breaking up upon re-entry to the Earth's atmosphere with help from Jean Grey. That was really cool. So if you ever check that out, check it out. That made no sense. Whatever. Let's move on. Number 1, Wind Dancer. Sophia Mantiga was increasingly isolated at a young age, being ignored by her father, Walter Barrett, after the death of her mother, and being told to not use her powers. Now, Sophia finally reached a breaking point. She entered into one of her father's grocery stores and let loose a hurricane inside of it. After she was arrested by police, Mr. Barrett was confronted by Danielle Moonstar, who saw Sophia on the news. She, persuaded him to enroll Sophia into the Xavier Institute. Sophia Mantiga has aerokinesis that she uses to amplify small vibrations in the air and draw far-off sounds to her ears. She can also disrupt the equilibrium of others with compressed air, lift herself off the ground for flight, create sharp forces of wind that can cut through material, and she even creates isolated whirlwinds or direct blasts of high-pressure air control. And she can manipulate the movement of air, but this is all before she was depowered. She has been a part of the Marauders, X-Corporation, New Warriors, and New Mutants squad. Number 10. Vanisher. Vanisher actually has the mutant ability of teleportation, but unlike mutants like Nightcrawler, Vanish's teleporting ability is completely psionic in nature and actually causes him to go through a series of extra-dimensional portals. But he does it so quickly he didn't even realize that was what he was doing. There is actually an instant where he tries to explore his powers more and stops his teleportation partway through, ending up trapped in the Dark Force dimension by its inhabitants. Vanish can also use his ability to bring a certain amount of mass other than himself with him when he teleports, which in one case allowed him to teleport himself and about 8 others from Southern California to Genosha. To add to that, Vanisher can actually also teleport any part of his body, kind of like how the Spot did it, but he does it so little that it's almost kinda not worth mentioning. Number 9. Tag. Brian Cruz, the mutant known as Tag, has the awesome ability called the Pariah Effect. Now this ability allows Brian to psionically tag a target, causing that person to emit a psionic signal that could make everyone, or even a select group of people in an area, either run away from or run towards and dogpile on top of the selected target, or who he likes to call it. The distance of this game of tag was about 100 feet, and everyone affected by the ability, excluding the one tagged, was fully aware of what they were doing while not being able to control their own actions. It's such an interesting ability, and it's fun as well because he can also tag a target with the effect of having that person run away from themselves, so they would just be uncontrollably running until he cancelled the effect. He was part of the group called the Helians until he lost his power on M-Day and passed away in a missile attack shortly afterwards. But luckily, Tag was resurrected on Krakoa, and hopefully we will get to see him use his abilities again at some point. Number 8. Hijack. Marvel's mutant David Bond actually has absolutely nothing to do with British 007s. Instead, David is the mutant known as Hijack with the technopathic ability to assume control over vehicles. It's kind of so oddly specific, and it makes me wonder if the ability works for things like bicycles or like scooters or something. This power gives me more questions than answers, to be perfectly honest. Look, he's controlled buses to ram into sentinels, and he's even been able to control an entire SHIELD helicarrier, and even a fleet of them at one point, which is definitely no small feat of its own. His abilities have even allowed David to control technological suits of armor, but curiously he couldn't control sentinels. Now, while his power could be used in quite a lot of different ways, David wasn't always the most useful of characters, so we didn't get a whole ton of him to analyze. Number 7. Primal. Adam Berman first appeared in X-Men Unlimited number 16 in July 1997, and his story arc was one I actually had a good time reading. It was oddly unique, at least to me. Adam is a mutant, but his ability is a transformative one, and he can easily hide it, which allowed him to kind of play himself off as a non-mutant even though he was trying to join the Xavier Institute. That's what I gathered, at least. It was kind of confusing. So you should read his story, but we are here for his abilities, not his story. And those said abilities almost remind me of other superpowered beings like the Hulk and even the Lizard, because Adam can transform into a totally primal reptilian-like form, growing about 50% bigger than his normal self and gaining red glowing eyes. But his physical enhancements are quite impressive. His strength boosts to around a level 10, with the highest level being a 100. But level 1 super strength is capable of pressing 800 pounds through a 25-ton range, so level 10 is nothing to scoff at. Look, just go read his story, okay? Number 6. Adam X. Another Adam! Almost like I liked that name or something. Adam Nuramani is honestly a bit more interesting than the last Adam though. He was a genetically created hybrid of both Emperor Deken of the Shi'ar Empire and Catherine Summers of Earth, created in an attempt to introduce more genealogies to the Shi'ar Empire. Now just as his origin is unique, so are his powers. Adam has the ability of electrokinetic hemopyrokinesis, or if you don't want to hurt yourself like I just did, you can also say sanguine combustion. which also sounds super cool. It basically means that he can send an electric surge through oxygenated blood, which leads to ignition of the electrolytes present in said blood, causing a person to burn from the inside out, which could result in a little subtle warming effect, or it could completely disintegrate a person. So there's a lot of wiggle room here, which is cool. But thanks to his Shi'ar side of things, he also has enhanced strength, agility, reflexes, stamina, speed, vision, and healing. So couple all that with his awesome fighting skills and the cool cybernetic retractable claws, and Extreme is someone you don't want to mess with. Coming in at number 5 is Shatterstar. So I was like this close to including Longshot on this list, but he doesn't even consider himself a mutant, and there's a whole bunch of weird time mojo verse stuff going on, so instead I'm going to do his father and or son, which is a whole other thing in itself. Look, all you need to know is we're talking about Shatterstar. Gavidra 7 learned the arts of battle as a warrior in arenas on Mojo World, where he developed both a sense of honor and incredible fighting skill, but those aren't his abilities. He possesses a large superhero starter pack: superhuman strength, speed, agility, stamina, durability, senses, reflexes, agility, dexterity, coordination, balance, plus a regenerative healing factor and even enhanced learning ability. Curiously though, he actually has hollow bones, which makes him a shim lighter than you would think he is, but also further boosts up his natural physical skills. The cool part of Shatterstar though are his Mojoverse swords, which he can use through his mutant ability to channel powerful vibratory shockwaves, which can be absolutely devastating but also kind of drains him of energy. But after his Mojo time, he can now create X-shaped portals as well that have to be linked to another person who acts as an anchor for said portals. These also drain him of energy, and he has a cooldown of about like 4 days before he can do it again, because this powerhouse needs some kind of balancing. Number 4, Aurora. In the last part of this series, we talked about Northstar, but that mutant has a sister. And guess what? Surprisingly, the mutant gene runs in the family. That shouldn't be surprising really, because genes and all that. Wow, this is a horrible intro. Janine Marie Beaubier, otherwise known as Aurora, can generate a bright light, which according to the wiki is equivalent to 500,000 foot candles. Or if you aren't weird, it's about as strong as a lighthouse light, which is also an extremely weird frame of reference, but I digress. She and her brother can both do this by varying the rate of acceleration of the molecules of their bodies out of phase with one another, thereby generating a cascade of photonic discharges. The light can actually do some interesting things, like she can make a calming light that can even interrupt psychic control, or she can make concussive light blasts. Or, which is even cooler, she can even create lightning blasts that actually do some considerable damage. Like her brother, she can also move incredibly fast, and thanks to her molecular manipulation, she can also be extremely durable, heal quickly, and even withstand all the g-force of moving so fast without doing those insane weird breathing exercises that pilots have to do. Number 3, Exodus. This character is one a lot of you may actually know is pretty powerful, as he does have a seat on the Krakoan Quiet Council and is insanely capable. Exodus actually began as Grand Duke Benet du Paris in the 12th century as a nobleman hailing from the medieval France. He was sent to fight in the Crusades in the Holy Lands, and on his journey out there, that's when his mutant powers awoke. And he even gained further enhancements from the mutant apocalypse, becoming one of his champions before being entombed until the modern era when Magneto awoke him and teamed up with him. He is one of the most powerful mutants alive. He is an Omega level psionic, using the abilities of telepathy, telekinesis, teleportation, and empathy. His level of telekinesis is so fine-tuned that he can even use it to manipulate things on the molecular and subatomic scales, allowing him to disassemble or reassemble complex devices, explosively even, and he's even been able to do this gaining control over electrons in an atom. He can create force fields, concussive blasts, electromagnetic blasts, and fly at speeds of around Mach 2. But he further uses his telekinesis to enhance his strength, speed, and reflexes to an impressive degree, as well as using his abilities to heal himself and others, resurrecting and fixing the atoms that make up our bodies. And that's all alongside his other abilities, including enhanced durability, longevity, healing factor, and a psionic vampirism. Number 2, Cosmar. When Tashi Rapina first showed up in 2020, her mutant powers caused a little bit of a problem. Tashi has Wanaric reality warping, essentially meaning her dreams branch out and affect the reality around her, trapping her and whoever is around in the dreams. Now, people trapped in there can be physically or telepathically affected by these abilities, so for example, when she was having a nightmare, some guards discovered her and were turned into monsters by her abilities, but it only added to the fuel of her nightmare, making things a lot more worse. Her abilities can also show others their dreams or fears. It took Wildside using their abilities to make Tashi's nightmares into a pleasant dream to free those who had been trapped inside. It's a bonkers power, and its emergence affected her physically too, which led her on a mission to try and find a way to look more human again. But her ability is definitely one of the more unique ones I've seen, with those who become trapped in her dreams being connected in one neural network with Tashi and used as a power source. Number 1. Danny Moonstar. Okay, a bunch of you guys mentioned Danny Moonstar in the comments of the last part, as there was a mutant that had a similar shtick. But Danny's powers are much more advanced than those of Beltane. While Beltane can create illusions of people's fears, Danny's powers only started here, but now she can create three-dimensional images of certain visual concepts from thoughts and emotional impressions within the minds of either herself or others. It used to be just fears, but then it moved on to deepest desires, and then as she grew, so too did her power to allow her to create images from thoughts and less intense emotions. So, as an example, as this actually happened, say Danny and Cannonball walk into a high-class hotel dressed casually. So to blend in, Danny used the image of what a well-dressed hotel guest would look like from the mind of the desk clerk and disguise both herself and her teammate in those images. She could do this with multiple people at once as well, creating illusions that were almost real to the person whom they belonged. But with a little help from Professor X, she was able to create an image that was physically tangible. That's her potential, but so far it's only happened the one time. Normally her power is used more as a psychological tool or trick, but it's not her only thing. Having powers that are psionic in nature, she can actually focus her powers into energy arrows, which can stun someone by disrupting their central nervous system or force them to relive a traumatic memory. And as she grew, these arrows became more capable of physical harm.
Number 10. Agent 13. While Sharon Carter might just be your average run-of-the-mill human on paper, in reality she is anything but your run-of-the-mill human when it comes to her capabilities. When the Secret Avengers team was brought together following the disbanding of Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers and Hammer, Captain America decided not to resurrect S.H.I.E.L.D., but instead create his own sub-Avengers teams to help keep the world safe. One of these teams was the Secret Avengers, and Sharon Carter was entrusted to be his kind of co-captain for it. Sharon Carter is Agent 13. Sharon was inspired to become an agent by tales that her Aunt Peggy Carter told her of her own heroics, as well as Captain America's. She joined S.H.I.E.L.D. and is considered to be among one of their best agents, being an expert in hand-to-hand combat as well as firearms. More importantly, Sharon is also a great tactician, strategist, and leader. Number 9. Goliath. Despite the fact that he died on the team, Goliath was still a powerful member. Goliath is Bill Foster, who used to work with Dr. Hank Pym as his assistant. Being a brilliant scientist himself, Foster was able to duplicate the formula for Pym particles. Exposing himself to Pym particles, he was given the ability to alter his size, turning himself into a giant. Well, at will. He could turn himself into a giant and then shrink back down. Hence the name Goliath. Safely, Foster could grow to 25 feet in height. His increase in size also gave him a great increase in strength and somewhat in durability due to his change in mass. The formula also allows his body to change so that it can actually support the weight of his new and larger form while he is transformed. However, Goliath was vulnerable if he changed sizes multiple times in a shorter period, as it left him weakened somewhat and exhausted temporarily. It's hard on the body, basically. He died during his time serving on the Secret Avengers during the first Civil War, which was actually the first Secret Avengers team, but not the first volume of Secret Avengers, to be clear. To some, his death only strengthened their conviction for the cause, and to others it acted as a warning to basically leave the team. And gave them a signal that actually what they were doing maybe it wasn't a good idea. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to learn more about other sub-Avengers teams or more about the Secret Avengers, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. There's still lots of powerful members that I haven't talked about yet, so we could probably do a part 2 for this one. Number 8. Ant-Man. Ant-Man for the purpose of this list is actually Eric O'Grady, not Hank Pym or Scott Lang. During the Secret Avengers run that Ant-Man was a part of, the mantle was being held by Eric. If you thought Scott's past and thieving actions were questionable, Eric basically puts him to shame. Eric is probably the baddest of the Ant-Men in terms of his morals, although I think all Ant-Men have made some morally questionable choices in their life. Still, O'Grady really takes the cake overall. Eric O'Grady is more commonly known as the Irredeemable Ant-Man, which was the name of his Ant-Man series, which really gives you an idea of what type of character he is. However, Eric had decided to turn over a new leaf and really try to make a difference in the world and become a hero, which was what motivated him to accept a position on the Secret Avengers team. Although to be clear, up to this point he was still a hero, he just was kind of like a very morally corrupt hero. He possesses the Ant-Man suit, which gives him his powers, allowing him to change size, shrinking down, and later growing in size as well. He can also communicate with and command insects. Can also, I think, do some cool energy blasty stuff. So he's pretty powerful. But still, it's Eric O'Grady. It's not like Hank Ant-Man. I think those are two different levels. Number 7. Blade. Blade was recruited to the Avengers by Nick Fury, who promised to deliver him Deacon Frost in exchange for his service. Frost is the man responsible for killing Blade's mother and turning him into the creature that he is, in case you didn't know that. Blade helped to apprehend Tyrone Cash after S.H.I.E.L.D. learned he was responsible for selling off their super soldiers on the black market. Blade incapacitated Cash through hypnosis. Ooh, supernatural powers. However, despite him being part vampire, Blade is not as tough as you'd expect, especially in comparison to the tough version of the character we know from the Earth 616. Iron Man found that out when he basically crushed the poor anti-hero. Blade's time serving as part of the Ultimate Avengers may have also helped to get him on the main continuity Avengers team of Earth 616 in the future. I also gotta say, I really love Blade as an addition to the 616 Avengers. I don't know if everybody else is super enjoying that, but I'm really enjoying that. Are you enjoying that? I hope you are. Number 6. Hawkeye. But wait a minute, isn't Hawkeye a member of the Ultimates? Well, yes, he has been that too, but hey, he can do both. Hawkeye, despite being more of a bona fide hero, still had a pretty shady past, which was what made him a great candidate for the Avengers team. Nick Fury invited him to join originally when they went on the hunt for Red Skull, and Barton agreed. In fact, I believe Hawkeye actually helped to bring this team together as well. The Avengers team for him was like a Black Ops group willing to do the dirty work that the Ultimates couldn't be seen getting involved in. Often this meant the villains they went after usually ended up dead. Such was the case with Red Skull in the end. Hawkeye might just seem like a guy with a bow, and well, he is. But he is really good with that bow. He has enhanced vision, which allows him to see much farther and clearer than your average human, and he is an extremely skilled fighter, pilot, and spy. So, you know. Also, he's deadly with fingernails, so watch yourself if you're just facing him as he is. If he's got fingernails, he's got weapons. Number 5. War Machine. War Machine is James Rhodes, who became a close friend to Iron Man and ended up being gifted a suit of armor from Tony to use in his own heroic adventures. He would end up being recruited and serve on the revived Avengers project as a member of the team during their first mission, where they attempted to defeat and capture Red Skull. Rhodey happened to be armed with a nuke to use against the Red Skull as part of a last resort plan, if needed. But the Red Skull had overheard about this plan and said nuke, and so managed to disable it easily using the Cosmic Cube. Honestly, if the Red Skull didn't have the Cosmic Cube though at this time, my money would have definitely been on War Machine in this fight, because War Machine I think is pretty powerful. War Machine would also for a time gain temporary Hulk-like powers after being given some of Tyrone Cash's Hulk serum. Number 4. Nerd Hulk. While Nerd Hulk is a very powerful character in terms of his abilities being on the same level of power as Bruce Banner's Hulk from Earth 1610, he tends to end up being not so powerful in actuality when battling other people. This is because he has a tendency to hold back though. Nerd Hulk is a clone that Gregory Stark, Tony Stark's brother, created. Nerd Hulk prefers to try and resolve conflicts using logic as opposed to violence, and it is the marriage of his intellect and strength combined that holds him back from being as deadly as he could be. Still, the potential is there, and he does have access to the same amount of strength and ferocity as Banner if he'd only feel inclined to use it. Nerd Hulk was a member of the Avengers team when they were first resurrected and went after Red Skull. He would also later attempt to join the Ultimates, but he was denied membership. Sad. Poor Nerd Hulk. I love him with his little glasses. Number 3, Valkyrie. Brunhilde is Valkyrie, or at least she was Valkyrie. Now there's another Valkyrie, and actually there's kind of like other Valkyries, multiple Valkyries, but I digress. Brunhilde is also Valkyrie in the comics. She ended up joining the Secret Avengers after her apparent death during the Fear Itself event. As a character, she dies quite a bit to be honest, but she usually gets to return, which is awesome. As an Asgardian, Brunhilde has powers that come from just being of Asgard. She has superhuman strength, speed, durability, reflexes, has slowed aging and an increased lifespan, and of course she can self-heal, although as I said, that doesn't always save her from dying, which happens. Number 2, Captain America. Probably one of the most important members of the Secret Avengers team at almost all times is Captain America. Captain America was the founder of the team the first time around and formed it to help fight back against Iron Man and the Superhuman Registration Act during Civil War. It was called Secret Avengers because of the fact that the team had to be kept secret, otherwise they would have been taken away and imprisoned due to the SRA or the SHRA. I don't know if superhuman, if those are their own letters or not. Captain America is a super soldier, a strong and motivational leader who also has super strength, speed, agility, speed, I said speed twice, but he's really speedy, I guess, and endurance, all thanks to him being exposed to the super soldier serum years ago in World War II. So he's not just super valuable as a leader, but he's also super powerful in general. Also, he's Captain freaking America. That's just having that name. I feel like if you're Captain America already, you get some kind of power level just from people being like, oh, it's Captain America. Number 1, Nova. Nova is Richard Rider. He basically came on to act as a Secret Avengers powerhouse when Captain America originally banded this team together after Hammer was disbanded, which I think means he gets our top spot by default. Also, Nova is just insanely powerful due to him being the host of the Nova Force. He only ended up sticking around for the first arc of the first Secret Avengers series volume, as he had to go do some cosmic stuff and he was pulled away, but he was still a member for a time, so we can still count him. Nova is insanely strong, fast, durable, can self-heal, can fly, also having the ability to fly through space, and he's super smart, as he has access to the Xandarian world mind, basically giving him access to all the knowledge of Xandar. So yeah, he's got it all, baby. He's got the strength, he's got the wits, he's got that sweet look in his awesome suit with his awesome helmet. He's got it all. Except he doesn't have the time to be on the Secret Avengers for too long. That's what he doesn't have. He lacks time.
At number 10, we have Captain America. I know it feels weird to have Cap in the 10th spot on any list about power, but remember who he's up against. Captain America's best trait is his unmatched leadership stat, which for superheroes is a really important angle to consider. But on a list about individual power, I'd say it only goes as far as who he's actually leading and ultimately fighting alongside. But without his strategic advantage, Captain America is still an extremely powerful Avenger and beats out plenty of other contenders that didn't make the list. The combination of his impressive fighting skill and his advanced strength levels is good enough to garner attention, but of course his vibranium shield is what really brings him to another level. Vibranium is a metal that actually absorbs all energy and contains it entirely. This means that whatever the shield is hit with, the metal itself will absorb the recoil almost entirely. Not to mention, it can pack a serious punch when it's thrown and will return to Steve's hand on command. This gives Cap a huge offensive and long-range advantage when he isn't showing off his massively impressive hand-to-hand combat skills. At number 9 is the one and only Spider-Man. It was tough to decide where to put Spidey on this list because he's so versatile, but he's also quite young and inexperienced. Well, at least he's supposed to be. But what really puts him at one ranking higher than the almighty Captain America are his Spidey senses and his healing factor. These two abilities really give Spidey the edge and help to define him as a more agile and crafty hero than many of the others on the list. Where Spider-Man might lack in sheer power, he makes up for in his adept precision and dexterity. And while he may not pack a huge punch in some of the more advanced combat situations that the Avengers face, he doesn't let anyone get the jump on him in any case, because he can always sense what's coming and has very quick reflexes to make the next move before his opponents even realize they'd missed him. In other words, Spider-Man often plays the role of David, while his opponents play the part of Goliath. Another thing that's important to note is that his suit upgrades allow him to gain huge strength boosts, expanding his power levels to a level that may never see its limit. At number 8, I'm putting Wolverine. As the most published comic book superhero ever, Wolverine has had the most experience out of anyone on this list. Not just because of all the things he's done, but also because of all the years that he has lived. His healing factor is so impressive that his age is extended by a great margin, making him appear nearly immortal. In fact, there have been a few times where Wolverine was entirely reduced to his adamantium-coated skeleton, and he was still walking around as if he'd just been a little banged up. But on top of his durability, he's also one of the most balanced heroes all around, which makes him a huge contender on a list about power. He's extremely agile, being quite skilled in acrobatics. He's got a very powerful offensive stat with his adamantium claws. He's also got a stealth stat since he's able to blend in as a civilian when his claws are retracted. He's got insane durability with his whole skeleton being coated in a metal only comparable to vibranium, and even if he takes a massive blow, his healing factor acts so fast and so efficiently that he's back to full health before he's even stood up. He's one of the big guns.
Number 7, Monica Rambeau. With the title of Captain Marvel, it's easy to not fully understand the powers of Monica Rambeau, but they are different to her other Captain Marvel counterparts, and in my opinion, she is my favorite of the characters to take on the title. After being bombarded with extra-dimensional energy emitted by a stolen device, Monica Rambeau acquired the ability to convert her body mass into and control any form of energy of the electromagnetic spectrum. Those energy forms include visible light, radio waves, electricity, X-rays, microwaves, infrared radiation, ultraviolet radiation, cosmic rays, and gamma radiation. But whenever she comes into contact with new forms of energy, such as neutrinos, Monica can mimic that energy's wavelength as well, given enough time, and she'll be able to actually transform into it. As you can imagine, there is a lot she can do with these various forms of energy: flight, speed of light travel, intangibility, invisibility, energy blast and absorption, hologram creation and appearance alteration, size alteration, power boosting, and she can even become a kind of hard solid light. Number 6, Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi is one of, if not the greatest martial artist on Earth. He was trained from birth to become the ultimate warrior. He can take on multiple opponents at once and can even defeat people much more superhumanly powerful than him. He is particularly skilled in Chinese martial arts, but his skill branches out to many more. In one case, he even worked with Spider-Man to create a new martial art based on Peter's powers. Shang-Chi also is able to manipulate Chi energy, which he can use to enhance his strength and durability, and can even detect others based on their energy, like he did when he detected the psionically masked Jean Grey. But Shang-Chi gets a much more significant power boost when he is using the 10 rings. He can use the rings as projectiles, manipulate their size, and even use them to levitate and fly. The rings grant the martial master superhuman strength, durability, speed, and stamina, and he can even manipulate energies from the rings to do many things, including projecting said energy and creating an energy-based blast. And then just to top it all off, thanks to the other side of his heritage, Shang-Chi inherited his mother's psionic abilities to communicate with his blood relatives, even the deceased ones. Number 5, Moondragon. It may come as a surprise, but Heather Douglas is actually one of the most powerful human-born telepaths in existence. She gained her power after she trained under the Shaolin monks of Titan, thanks to Thanos' father, Mentor, taking her in. Her telepathic abilities rival and surpass even those of powerful mutants like Professor X. With this power, she has been able to mentally enslave an entire planet of beings who were constantly at war with each other, bringing peace to said planet. She has been in a psionic stalemate with the Sorcerer Supreme, and she's even straight up de-lifed a clone of Thanos who, at the time, had even greater mental powers than Professor X. Her powers are so powerful, in fact, that they can maintain themselves subconsciously, meaning that even if she is unconscious, she will maintain the effects of said powers. A huge part of her character, even the reason for her awesome Moondragon name, comes from the fact that she is, or was, actually under the influence of an extremely powerful entity known as the Dragon of the Moon, who has been manipulating her for a long time, even initially letting Heather believe she had overcome the demon. But thanks to this dragon, she has been able to take on a dragon form where she can move faster than light, survive in space, and was super strong and durable. Number 4, Jack of Hearts. Jonathan Hart is a hero you may not have heard of. Jack Hart was the son of a brilliant scientist, a scientist that created the ridiculously efficient liquid sci-fi fuel called Zero Fluid, that in a tragic comic book backstory was exposed to Jack and gave him his awesome abilities. Due to the cellular mutation that took place after his Zero Fluid exposure, Jonathan Hart is now able to produce pink concussive energy beams and blasts from his hands and body, taking up the incredibly clever name of Jack of Hearts, apparently in honor of his father's love of card games, and not because it's actually his name, basically. His biological structure was reformatted to basically give him the superhuman starter pack abilities, but his strength specifically has been able to lift 25 tons. He has enhanced speed, stamina, healing factor, and durability, able to withstand some pretty heavy hits and survive in the vacuum of space. But in addition, thanks to a symbiote energy sub-device, Jack went through another mutation which gave him the ability to think as fast as a computer can, and he can retain and retrieve stored information from the deep recesses of his brain, which is pretty cool.
At number 3 is Nova. Being basically the protector of the cosmos, Richard Rider's Nova had to make it into the top 20. Being one of the primary members of the intergalactic law enforcement agency, Nova brings a cosmic level of power to the Avengers. And the main ability that really puts him above the rest is his power absorption, which is capable of using an enemy's power against them. And the limits of this power are yet to be truly maxed out, meaning that I'm not sure if we can even know the extent of his power level quite yet. But considering he's been able to weaponize gravity itself with this ability, I'd say there aren't even really limits at all. Of course, when he takes in power, it has to go somewhere, and it's usually emitted as a highly powerful energy beam that can be aimed at any nearby or distant targets. In prime form, he's also been known to travel at near light speeds, which is verging on speedster level. One of his most notable feats is when he sacrifices himself by trapping himself and Thanos in the Cancerverse. This just shows his immense influence and how far he'd go as a protector of not only Earth, but the cosmos as a whole. At number 2 is Gilgamesh. You know that at least one of the Eternals had to make it onto this list, so here he is. Gilgamesh doesn't have a long run as part of the Avengers, but the short time he gives to them is enough to put him nice and high up on this list. Now, most superheroes tend to have superhuman strength and land somewhere on the scale measured in the amount of tons they can lift usually, but we can basically just throw that scale in the garbage because Gilgamesh is off the charts in his strength stat. His strength level is on par with that of Hercules and Thor, only maybe being usurped by the Hulk himself. But on top of his extreme strength level, he is also capable of flight, energy blasts, and a certain level of energy manipulation, which, when all paired together, makes for a massive powerhouse who beats out many of the other members of the Avengers. Finally, at number 1 is a hero who could have arguably made the part 1 of this video, Captain Marvel. Born as a human, Carol Danvers' DNA is fused with Kree genes, thus turning her into a next level superpowered being. Being able to fly 6 times the speed of sound and having an adept energy manipulation skill, there's no wonder why Captain Marvel is considered one of the most valuable members to ever grace the Avengers. Whether she's destroying asteroids with a single punch or surviving an HLA energy bomb, Captain Marvel seems to be everywhere at once. And she sort of can be, given her insane speed and near omniscience with her flash precognition ability. This power allows her to anticipate events all across the cosmos from wherever she is, which is part of what makes her stand out as one of the foremost protectors of the cosmos. It's also just really helpful in anticipating the moves of her opponents before they make them. And although she does acquire this power when she's turned into binary, there are still remnants of it within her to this day.
Coming in right at number 10 is Richter. Julio Richter has a pretty interesting mutant power. Richter can manipulate various aspects of the planet itself. Originally, his powers manifested in simple seismic energy, allowing him to create earthquakes, shock waves, and rudimentary transport of Earth matter. However, after Richter's powers evolved, he now has the ability to remotely terraform the ground around him in a much more precise manner. He can toss rocks around with precision or will the ground to open up like a tunnel. But he also has some skill with plants, controlling vines and other plants to ensnare his opponents. Julio also gained magma kinesis after being trapped under an active volcano and just rising out of it, riding on top of the magma like an absolute badass. More impressive than that though is that Richter's powers have created a psychic/empathic bond between himself and the primal life force of Earth's biosphere, allowing him some clairvoyance and mysticism. Definitely one of the coolest characters I have never heard of. I just wanted to pause here to say if you're enjoying this list so far, dropping a like is all you have to do to help us out and let us know that this is what you want to see. And on that note, we're gonna get to number 9, who is Gorgeous George. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and when I behold George Blair, gorgeous is not the word that comes to mind, but nonetheless that is the name he holds. Gorgeous George's body is composed of this tar or putty-like stuff that, through his thoughts, can be expanded, morphed, and reshaped in any way he wants. Using this ability, he has been able to turn his entire body into a puddle or make himself extremely slippery to avoid capture. Side note, becoming extra slippery just makes me like ick, you know? I don't like that slipperiness. George is also very hard to injure. He can reconstitute parts of his body and can even bend to dodge attacks. The slippery thing also kind of helps with this as well. He has also once tried to choke Strong Guy by using his powers to enter his lungs, which is just a terrifying thought. On a lighter note though, his arms are actually longer than normal because he forgot their normal length after getting drunk with other members of Mr. Sinister's Nasty Boys. Well, that's kind of cool. And at number 8 is Pyro. St. John Allardyce is an Australian pyrokinetic mutant. He has the ability to control flame to grow in size and intensity and to even take on any form he desires. He has used flame to create almost solid creations he refers to as, quote, the living flame, which have been in the shape of gigantic claws, birds, or even golems. The size, power, and intensity of the fire beings Pyro created were limited only by the extent of his imagination, the degree of his concentration, and his force of will. The only problem for Pyro is that he cannot generate flames spontaneously. He needs a source, which has been flamethrowers in his costume, other allies like Lockheed, or like a lighter or something. He could also be burnt by any fire that wasn't under his direct control. Now, he used his abilities mainly for evil deeds and crimes, but since his resurrection on Krakoa after he died due to the legacy virus, he has gone on to join Kate Pryde's Marauders and got this crazy skull tattoo on his face. It's kind of cool, but also I wouldn't do it, but you know, whatever. Number 7 is Strong Guy. I kind of can't believe I haven't talked about Guido Carosella yet. Despite this guy's massive hulking appearance, he is one of the most entertaining mutants around. Essentially, Guido, who goes by the name Strong Guy, has the ability to absorb kinetic energy and use it to enhance his physical strength. Now, at a base level, he can lift around 50 tons, which is already more than a lot of superpowered beings. But using his kinetic absorption, he can boost that strength up to far above 100 tons, making him one of the strongest characters in Marvel Comics. Unfortunately, Guido's body suffers from his mutation. Storing the kinetic energy he absorbs for more than 90 seconds will permanently distort his body in very painful ways. The distortions he's already suffering from cause him to be in constant pain, which, being the great guy he is, pushed him towards being absolutely hilarious to hide his pain. Hey y'all, if you love the manga, if you love the anime, well then make sure to check out Most Amazing Top 10 Anime. James is an awesome host bringing you videos just like this one, but with that manga and anime setting. You should definitely check it out. And coming off of that, number 6 is Layla Miller. Of all the mutant powers I've come across, Resurrection is one that doesn't actually happen too often. But Layla's Resurrection ability is an interesting one. It comes with a major side note. Layla has the ability to resurrect dead beings, restoring their bodies and their consciousness, but not their soul. Without their soul, the resurrected being will have no conscience or morality. We saw this happen both with Strong Guy and Trevor Fitzroy, who were resurrected by Layla, who eventually experienced drastic changes in their personality without their souls. Another key factor about this resurrection is that it can only be performed within minutes of the individual's death. Layla claims she can also reverse this process, taking back the life that she gives. Another interesting note for Layla is that during the House of M, Layla was resistant to Wanda's reality warping abilities and retained all of her memories. She could even give others back their memories. She's also been to the future and studied magic with Dr. Doom, so like, that's cool as well. Coming in at number 5 is M. just the letter M. Monet St. Croix has an interesting past, and honestly, her family is a big part of that. Her brother is an incredibly powerful bad dude who trapped her in a different form where she is known as Penance. As Penance, she has diamond skin, a telepathic resistance, and super sharp claws. M can even combine with her younger siblings Claudette and Nicole, but on her own, Monet is essentially a near perfect being. All of her physical and mental skills are greater than the natural physical limits of peak humans, granting her super strength, speed, agility, stamina, senses, intuition, and a genius level intellect, as well as reflexes that even allow her to catch bullets. She can fly at supersonic speeds by sheer force of will, she can read minds, project her thoughts into the minds of others, and defensively mask her mind against telepathic intrusion, and she has even displayed some telekinesis. And on top of all that, she has the power of being ridiculously good looking. Lucky. Number 4, Marius St. Croix. I could talk about Monet St. Croix for a long time, but her brother, he is just terrifying and needs to be discussed. Marius, who eventually goes by the name Emplate, has the ability to siphon mutant energy by feeding on the bone marrow of mutants using his super creepy feeder mouths that appear on the palms of his hands. Emplate needs the energy from mutants in order to survive, almost like a mutant vampire. And like a vampire, if Marius siphons all of a person's energy, his victims will pass away. Also like a vampire, if Emplate drains only part of a victim's energy, he can gain a kind of psychic control over their mind, and can cause the mutant to become an energy vampire just like him, but under his control. Kind of like a vampire's familiar. Interestingly, when feeding from a victim, he actually cancels out their powers and copies them for himself. After multiple feedings, he even gains their power permanently, like he did with Penance's diamond skin. And at number 3 is Chamber. Chamber, or Jonathan Evans Starsmore, discovered his powers when a blast of psionic energy burst from his torso, destroying much of his chest and his face. It turns out that Chamber is actually literally composed of that same psionic energy, and his body just acts as a shell for it. When his powers burst out of him, the wound was replaced by a constant glow of psionic fire, leaving him unable to speak. Instead, he can only communicate telepathically. Additionally, he does not eat, drink, or even breathe, as he has no organs. Chamber constantly created and unleashed psionic charges of energy that could strike with a volatile force, being projected as a blast from his chest, a series of guided streams that struck specific targets, or as a massive eruption striking in all directions. Now, if he was given the time to train properly, Chamber could have potentially been one of the most powerful mutants to walk the earth, but unfortunately he's not. Number 2, Mikhail Rasputin. As the older brother of both Colossus and Magic, Mikhail Rasputin has quite the mutant genealogy, and he ain't no chump himself. Mikhail is an alpha level mutant with the ability to manipulate subatomic matter and warp energy. His power hasn't really been properly defined, but he could forcibly fuse a man to a tree and could manipulate Bobby Drake, Iceman's body. Speaking of Iceman, Mikhail also seemed to display some form of enhanced perception, being able to see Bobby's potential just by looking at him, and he could show him how to use his powers in better ways. Mikhail has also used his power to fire energy blasts, tamper with people's powers, and most prominently for teleportation. He could transport himself as well as others by opening up dimensional portals by ripping away at the subatomic wall of space, which he did when the Soviets sent him into space and blew up his ship. Sorry. And coming in at number 1 is Sienna Blaze. Sienna Blaze has incredibly strong destructive abilities, thanks to the fact that Sienna can disrupt a planet's electromagnetic energy spectrum, absorbing the energy into her body and then releasing it, usually in destructive blasts. Sienna's released energy would tear a hole in the local electromagnetic field, which is bad, in case you wondered, with repeated use of her power theoretically being able to destroy the planet. She can also use the magnetic energy to fly at 150 miles per hour, or impressively to teleport herself along the planet's electromagnetic field. Again, every time she teleports, she permanently damages the electromagnetic field at the point of departure, causing a pretty pretty strong explosion. As an example, Sienna shot down the X-Men's Blackbird in Antarctica. Sienna then ambushed Cyclops and Storm and nearly completely took them out until Professor X prevented her from using her powers. Then Storm, Cyclops, and Professor X managed to defeat Sienna, except she just teleported away and left a massive explosion in her stead.
Number 10. Miss Marvel. Miss Marvel was once Carol Danvers and is now Kamala Khan. And of course for this list we're focusing on Kamala, who was a new addition to the Avengers team in 2015, after making her first unnamed appearance only 2 years earlier in 2013 in the comics. Kamala is a huge Carol Danvers fan, which is what inspired her to take up the mantle Miss Marvel after Carol dropped it, taking up the Captain Marvel mantle instead herself. Kamala as Miss Marvel has powers which allow her to alter her body's physiology, allowing her to stretch, change size and shape, and in theory, straight up shapeshift. Her powers come from inhuman heritage, which was activated by her exposure to the Terrigen bomb. Kamala joined the team for a time during all new, all different Avengers, and remains a fan favorite hero at Marvel Comics. And to clarify before we move on to point 9, this is going to be a list of Avengers that have recently come onto the team, as opposed to new Avengers, which is kind of its own thing. There's a lot of new Avengers, so I just wanted to clarify that. Number 9. Wasp. Not the same Wasp who years ago was actually the leader of the Avengers for a while. Nuh-uh, we are not talking about Janet Van Dyne here, we are talking about Nadia Van Dyne, who despite her seemingly misleading name is actually the daughter of Hank Pym and his first wife, Maria Travoia. After her mother Maria was kidnapped and later killed, Nadia ended up being raised in the Red Room, considered a valuable asset due to her natural aptitude for science and academia, believed to be somewhat in part due to the fact that she was Hank's naturally born daughter. Nadia would eventually escape the Red Room and attempt to locate her father in the US, only to find out that he had recently died during a fight against Ultron. Nadia felt compelled to meet her stepmother, Janet, desiring to become the new Wasp. The two ended up getting along well, and Janet even gave Nadia her blessing to take her last name, seeing her as family. Hence, Nadia became both Nadia Van Dyne and the new Wasp, also going on to join the Avengers team. Number 8. Spider-Man. Peter Parker as Spider-Man has of course teamed up with the Avengers before, but Miles Morales as Spider-Man is a newer addition, not just in terms of the Avengers team, but also still relatively new in terms of him existing in 616. Miles Morales is originally a Spider-Man who hails from the Ultimate Comics line originating in Earth 1610, the Ultimate Universe. He was given a new home on Earth 616 after his world had been destroyed as a result of showing kindness to and sharing food with Molecule Man during the Secret Wars event. True story. Thank goodness for pocket cheeseburgers. Miles has a power set very similar to Peter's in many ways, but also has a few unique abilities of his own. He can shock his opponents with venom blasts and can sneak up on them with his spider camouflage, which he can use to appear invisible. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to learn about even more newest additions to the Avengers we've seen in recent years, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. Number 7. Beast. Beast is Hank McCoy, one of the original members of the X-Men and also one of the brainiest members of the Secret Avengers. He ends up being recruited for his brilliant mind, but there is a lot that Beast brings to the table when it comes to his skill and his power set. In the comics, it's also been established that he is incredibly, impossibly agile and dexterous. He also possesses superhuman strength, endurance, and durability. He has healing factor, which allows him to recover more quickly than most from injuries, and also slows his aging. His senses are heightened, and he has strong telepathic defenses, which can protect him against even some of the strongest psionics in the world of Marvel. He also has a few unique powers, such as his ability to be aware of the time stream, which makes him more aware if something is altered or otherwise out of place within it. He's also believed to have some level of pheromone powers. In other words, you really shouldn't underestimate Beast. I don't say it enough, but he truly is a beast of a superhero who brings a lot to the table. I'm happy I was able to put him on this list. Do you agree that Hank should be above Ant-Man? I don't know, but I think he deserves it, you know? Not enough appreciation for Hank McCoy. Number 6. Moon Knight. Moon Knight was considered a questionable recruit to the post-Dark Reign Secret Avengers team the Cap brought together, and yet he still makes a lot of sense when you consider just how dangerous and how capable he is. Moon Knight might live with a dissociative identity disorder, but this often doesn't get in his way of completing whatever mission he is on in his own heroic life, nor does it often affect his ability to be a hero. Still, the other heroes on the team did personally question if Moon Knight was the right fit and the right pick. Moon Knight has access to amazing weapons and tech thanks to being outfitted by Stephen Grant, another prominent persona that resides in Mark Spector's psyche, who is a millionaire. He also has tons of intel, which is provided to him through one of his other personas, Jake Lockley, who's a cab driver. When it comes to his power set, he is an incredibly skilled fighter who has the favor of a god, the moon god Khonshu, on his side, and this also makes him hard to kill because usually Khonshu will just bring him back to life. He's also got enhanced strength, endurance, and agility at night, especially if it's a full moon. Moon power, baby! Get that moon power. Number 4. Black Widow. Black Widow makes for a great addition to Captain America's Secret Avengers team that is formed following the end of Norman Osborn's Dark Reign. This team was one that Captain America brought together to basically serve as his Black Ops team. Their main mission was to help clean up all the messes that Norman Osborn had left about during his time ruling Hammer and the Dark Avengers. Considering that Natasha is a highly skilled and trained assassin who also has extensively reflected on the moral dilemma that comes attached to things like assassinating people and Black Ops, she makes a great fit. She is extremely experienced with walking that fine line between getting less savory jobs done, but also making sure you don't lose yourself and that you only do as much as is really necessary. Not only is she highly trained and skilled, but it's also implied that she technically has superpowers after being exposed to a Russian variation of the super soldier serum during her time in the Red Room. It's how she can stay so youthful and she looks so young forever. That Russian super soldier serum. Making sense of how is Black Widow even still alive and what is going on. Number 3. Phoenix. While Phoenix is definitely one of the most powerful superheroes to be on the Avengers team, her history with them is a bit more lengthy than you might initially think, which is why I ranked her a little bit lower on this list than I normally would. Phoenix herself was back on the original Avengers team, the prehistoric Avengers, or the Avengers of 1 million BC. This avatar for Phoenix was known as Firehair. However, Firehair only made her first appearance even in 2017 in the comics, so she's also kinda new in a way, even though she's super old. Does that make sense? Maya Lopez, aka Echo, is the current host of the Phoenix Force and the current Phoenix, who also finds herself on the Avengers team. Her being Phoenix is new, but her being on the Avengers team is not new. She rejoined the team in 2021 as Phoenix, which is quite new, like I said, but she actually was a member of the Avengers way back in 2005, when she was using the mantle of Ronin. Still, Maya being Phoenix and being part of the Avengers altogether is quite fresh right now, despite both the Phoenix Force's history with the prehistoric team and Maya's own history with the present day team. And of course, Phoenix is one of the most powerful entities in the entire Marvel universe. So despite her being kind of a new old combo thing, we have to show respect to the blazingly brilliant and powerful Maya Lopez, aka Echo, aka Phoenix, on this list. Number 2. Cable. Nathan Summers ended up joining the Avengers team at a time when Captain America was seeking to present a show of unity. Hence, Cable ended up being on the Avengers Unity division, which was meant to bring together Avengers and X-Men after events of Avengers vs. X-Men had created tension between the two superhero groups of Earth. Series-wise, the team was known as the Uncanny Avengers, with Cable joining up as early as issue number 4. Cable is an extremely powerful telepath and telekinetic due to him being the offspring of X-Men member Cyclops and his wife at the time, Mr. Sinister created clone of Jean Grey, Madeline Pryor. Despite Maddie being his birth mother, Jean has also been like a mother to Nate after she was implanted with the memories of basically raising him, making her kind of like his telepathically retcon mom, with Maddie becoming more like a surrogate mother in terms of her relationship with Nate, formerly known to her as Baby Christopher. Oh, baby Christopher. Number 1. Avenger Prime. Avenger Prime is kinda like all of the Avengers merged together. At least, that's what the original version of this character was like. They made their first appearance in the 2013 Mighty Avengers series, but another character with that name also recently reappeared in the 2021 Free Comic Book Day Avengers and Hulk comic. They showed up in the Avengers portion of that double feature story comic. Here, Avengers Prime is the leader of the Deathlock Avengers forces, who basically stands guard at the God Quarry, seeking to watch, protect, and warn against major multiversal threats and potential chronal collapses. Presumably, this is some version of Avenger Prime that decided to stay omnipotent and bonded together. At least that's what I'm assuming. Some people are assuming different things. When we saw Avenger Prime last, or an alternate version of them if you will, they were created using a ritual which allowed the team of Mighty Avengers to bond together. Technically, Avenger Prime stands to be the most powerful of the Avengers, as they should be made up of one or more teams or rosters potentially combined together. Now, of course, some people believe that Avenger Prime is actually some sort of alternate version or some future version of Tony Stark, aka Iron Man, but we don't really know for sure yet. Whoever they are though, they definitely seem to have a lot of time, a lot of power, and a lot of resources on their hands, especially for being a shadowy figure.
At number 9 is Vision. Now, if you're more familiar with the MCU than the comics, you may know Vision as more of a tragic character, but Vision is anything but that in the comics, from his power levels to his unique origin story. In Avengers number 57, Vision is still created by Ultron, but his body is formed using Horton cells to replace human anatomy, and his consciousness is made to replicate that of Wonder Man and a little bit of Alex Lipton. Then once he sets off to tear apart the Avengers, he disobeys his orders and instead joins them, becoming one of the leading members as a result. And it's quite the acquisition for the Avengers because Vision is widely considered one of the most powerful of all time. For example, that one time when he increases his density and turns himself into a meteorite to take out Nefaria in Avengers number 166, or how he proves his worthiness of Mjolnir in the MCU, which is a huge moment for any hero, especially in AI. He's also got his extremely powerful energy blasts, his incorporeal form that he can use on command, and immortality. If he isn't ever destroyed, he will basically survive as long as his parts get repaired every once in a while. And plus, he's just a very pragmatic hero, capable of using heightened intelligence to keep emotions out of every decision he makes. At number 8, we have Wonder Man. Where do we begin with this guy? Well, firstly, for those of you who don't know, Wonder Man is another case where he initially fights against the Avengers before coming around to joining them. Wonder Man is essentially immortal, having been resurrected from temporary deaths multiple times and getting stronger each time, might I add. He is an ionic powered being who doesn't age and doesn't need oxygen, food, or water to survive, but that's just speaking to his invulnerability. He's also a shapeshifter with adept teleportation and martial arts abilities. He's known to be in the 100-ton strength class, putting him up there in power levels with the Sentry, the Hulk, and Thor. Oh yeah, and he can't be infected by a symbiote, which is great news for the Avengers, who would basically be done for if that happened. Some of his more impressive feats include knocking out Hercules, Namor, and Abomination, as well as holding off the Thing, and of course taking down Ultron with his bare hands. The only thing holding Wonder Man back is his inflated ego and insecurities about his powers, as well as his somewhat vague sense of right and wrong at times, but that's not much of a downside considering how powerful this Avenger is. At number 6, we have one of the most important members of the Avengers and my personal favorite, Iron Man. What could I say to try and convince you of Iron Man's placement on this list? Well, my favorite way of describing Iron Man's sheer power level is that it's technically uncapped. Tony Stark's biggest trait is his immense intellect, which shouldn't necessarily be considered on a list about power as a standalone ability. But when that intellect is able to produce the Iron Man suit, the War Machine suit, and every iteration of Spider armor, as well as not to mention the Hulk Buster armor, it surely should be considered. So I say that his power potential doesn't have a ceiling, only because if he's not the most powerful on this list right now, there's plenty of room for him to improve down the line with his inventions. But as he stands, he's still got his own AI system Jarvis, integrated into an all-powerful Iron Man armor which is outfitted with near endless ballistics and energy weaponry. And I'd argue that Iron Man has a certain level of omnipotence as well, because his systems are always tapped into external sources that support him in battle, like drones or even backup armor upgrades on the fly. Okay, at number 5 is Black Panther. T'Challa is not to be messed with, and it's not just because most of his gear is outfitted with all the vibranium anyone could ever hope for. He's also got a level of dexterity and stealth that brings his combat abilities to another level. This could be seen in the comics when he's able to take down Namor not once, but twice, or when he also finds a way to take out the Silver Surfer, which is an insanely impressive feat on its own. But what puts Black Panther above Iron Man for me is that he's got a similar intellect and employs it almost more impressively at times. He's able to create similarly ingenious pieces of technology to start, and much of the time totally on the fly. Like the one time when he creates a device on the spot that blocks Thanos' synapses in his mind, knocking him out there and then, at least for a time. But this is a big moment that shouldn't be ignored. Considering he's capable of this level of technological aptitude, and he's a superpowered being on top of it, it just gives him that extra edge over Iron Man for me. And that comes from a huge Iron Man stan. Although Black Panther is in my top 3 as well. At number 4 we have Hercules. I want to acknowledge that Ares could also easily hold this spot, but I figured that the list only had room for one Greek god. And having been teased in Thor Love and Thunder's post-credit sequence, it's looking like Hercules is set to appear in an upcoming MCU project, and it's about time. Hercules is one of the few characters that has ever been able to contend on an even keel as Thor, which I think speaks to how powerful he is in the comics. Son of the god of lightning, Zeus, Hercules is known as the god of strength, which should be enough to put him on this list to begin with. But what could also convince you would be, I don't know, that one time when he picks up all of Manhattan while facing off against Thor, or the time when he destroys the Thor clone in Civil War, which acts as a turning point for Cap's army. If that's not enough to convince you though, Hercules is also known to run at speeds above 100 miles per hour. Even though most people associate Hercules with Greek mythology, he has a very lengthy run with the Avengers and proves himself as one of their most powerful members ever. At number 3 we have the one and only God of Thunder, Thor. These top 3 were tough for me to rank because they're such popular and fluctuating characters in both the comics and the MCU. But it's fair to say that Thor takes a spot in the top 3 based on his insane influence on the Avengers, as well as his sheer power potential. Originally known to be the only other being in the Marvel Universe to contend with the Hulk, Thor has only grown stronger over the years, with plenty of other heroes filling the gap between him and the Worldbreaker. And some of these feats that he has attained have been due to his extremely lengthy existence, having been a practicing warrior for millennia. Using his belt of strength and his hammer Mjolnir, Thor is also one of the best equipped heroes in the universe. He is powerful enough to resist the gravitational pull of a neutron star, knock out the Phoenix Force with one blow, and famously take out Mangog and Thanos in back-to-back fights. I could stand here and pretend to convince you. The real fans know that the only argument here is that maybe Thor could be placed even higher on the list. That would only knock out our number 2 spot, Scarlet Witch, and I'm not sure how I'd feel about that, because this hero is just an absolute powerhouse for the Avengers. She is the daughter of Magneto, or maybe not as of recently, but I liked it better when she was, and she possesses an extremely dangerous and powerful set of magical abilities. Known to be able to manipulate reality on a cosmic scale, Scarlet Witch's powers have grown exponentially since her introduction in the X-Men number 4 in 1964. She has famously eliminated the powers of 99% of all mutants with one whisper during the House of M storyline, which is an absolutely insane feat of power. But she's also shown that she's possibly capable of creating whole universes on command, which brings her to yet another crazy level of power. Some people might argue to put her further back on the list because of her volatility as a hero, or arguably an anti-hero, but I honestly think that her powers are just too impressive to be outweighed by her struggles to control them. In fact, I almost put her at number 1, but the top spot had to go to Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange started off as a character that might not have presented as much of a powerhouse, but over time he has proven himself to be the most valuable member that the Avengers have ever had. He is capable of bending time and space on command with adept precision, and can detect threats from extreme distances in space and time before they even occur. And if you take issue with this number 1 placement, just think of the scale of the forces he's faced with within his own storylines. He has to protect the world from the likes of Dormammu, Nightmare, and Urthona, among many other godlike demons. But what really makes Doctor Strange the most powerful out of all the Avengers is that he doesn't need to contend with opposition on the plane of reality that they come to him in. He is able to view the future and decide on how he wants it to play out before changing the fabric of reality to control any outcome he's faced with. The only reason that I could imagine someone might keep him from the number 1 spot these days is that he's known to have been nerfed quite a bit in the last 20 years, but even today I'd still argue that his power set puts him in the top spot.
Number 10 is Spike. I talked about Maro in part 8, so it's only fair that I talk about the animated X-Men Evolution character known as Spike. Spike, or Evan Daniels, was actually the nephew of Aurora Monroe, but his mutant powers are much different than hers. Similar to Maro, Evan can manipulate his bones, causing it to project through his skin to create armor and bone spikes that he can use as melee weapons, or he can even launch the spikes from his body as projectiles. Unlike Maro though, Spike's bones piercing through his skin and being broken off, or fired as projectiles, doesn't actually hurt him, which is a huge benefit. What's super interesting though is that after some time with the Morlocks, Spike was able to make his bone spikes so hot they were almost on fire, which actually kind of raises more questions that go unanswered than anything else. In at number 9 is Avalanche. You don't often get Greek mutants, which makes Dominic Petros a pretty unique character already. Dominic came from the Greek island of Crete, which is somewhere I desperately want to travel to, so if someone can like hook me up with that, that'd be great, thanks. Like a lot of mutants though, he started out as a villain. Originally part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, then X-Corps, Project Wide Awake, Freedom Force, and Villains for Hire. He's gotten around, and with the destructive capabilities of his powers, it honestly kinda makes sense. Avalanche can create super powerful vibration waves from his hands. These waves can cause matter to shatter or crumble, and if he uses it on the earth or even large buildings, he can basically create earthquakes or, wait for it, avalanches. But Avalanche has quite the control over this ability, able to move objects, create tidal waves, cause the ground to move or shatter, or even ride waves of earth as transportation. And he even used his abilities to be a fantastic landscaper. If you guys are enjoying this content, I beg of you, slap that thumbs up button. It's the only thing you can do to prove you're loyal to me. I mean, to show your support. Number 8, the Blob. The Blob, or Frederick Dukes, is one of those characters I really didn't give enough credit to when I was growing up. He can actually do some pretty cool things, and some things that didn't even occur to me. His actual main mutant ability, for example, is that he can essentially become immovable by creating a monodirectional increase of gravity beneath him that extends out about 5 feet in radius from his center of balance. But what's even cooler is that with some training, Blob was able to manipulate his gravitational aura outwards in order to trigger a localized implosion. Also, the Blob is incredibly durable. The fat on the Blob is able to absorb the impact of rifle bullets, cannonballs, bazookas, and even torpedoes. He has even been able to survive being hit by a meteorite that was 50 feet in diameter moving at terminal velocity, which is insane. But that's not all. Blob is also able to manipulate his body, basically shapeshifting to a degree. After undergoing the Mother Vine enhancement process, Blob even developed a secondary mutation, liquid form, and here I thought he was just incredibly fat. Number 7, Caliban. If you have seen Logan, then you'll recognize Caliban as the bald, seemingly albino mutant who hangs out with Logan and Professor X. In that movie, he displays Caliban's main ability, which is being able to detect mutants' X genes, usually within about a 25-mile radius. Although, it's worth noting he has been able to detect particularly powerful mutants from further away before. But what I want to talk about is Caliban's other power that most people don't know. It's called his flight or fight response. So whenever Caliban feels stressed, he manifests 2 extra powers: super strength that can overpower Spider-Woman, and fear absorption. This second power allowed Caliban to absorb the psionic energy created in the fear from others and amplify it back into his environment, doing things like very quickly turning those nearby into a fear-induced panicking mob. This ability was boosted by Apocalypse twice when Caliban served him as both death and pestilence. Number 6, Frenzy. Joanna Cargill, like a lot of the X-Men, started off as a villain. She ran away from her home after her mutant powers activated, and she caused the passing of her not-so-great dad in self-defense. From there, she would join Apocalypse's Alliance of Evil, where she would do battle with the X-Men. She would go on to join the Acolytes and eventually the X-Men too. Now, she works as an agent of S.W.O.R.D. on Abigail Brand's X-Men Red team. So, with a history like that, she has got to have some cool powers. Well, Frenzy's main power is invulnerability. She possesses steel-hard skin, which has only ever been penetrated by adamantium. She's also highly resistant to extreme hot and cold, as well as radiation, and she can withstand high impact forces like Cyclops' optic beam or a punch from She-Hulk. Speaking of She-Hulk, a byproduct of Frenzy's power is that she has super strength as well, enough to lift around 25 to 75 tons and punch Jennifer Walters back if she wants to. Number 5, Typhoid Mary. Okay, so if you know who the Mutant Legion is, the one who has hundreds of different alternate personalities that all have different mutant powers, well, Mary Walker is sort of like that, only for Mary she has only a handful of alternate personalities and they just allow her to access the powers that just Mary can't access. Those powers include limited amounts of pyrokinesis, telekinesis to move small objects, grabbing her dropped weapons or even turning objects into armor, and telepathy, usually used to manipulate others or influence people to do things without thinking, like kissing her or grabbing their weapons. Her Mary persona is a pretty quiet and timid person with no actual powers, but her other main persona is Typhoid, who is more adventurous, lustful, and violent. She later adopted a few other personas like Bloody Mary, who was sadistic and brutal and pretty much hated all men. Kind of understandable, sort of. And Mutant Zero, who was a cold, calculated, and militaristic person. Number 4, Mask. The Morlock leader, Mask, has a pretty ironic ability. He himself is not exactly the most gorgeous of beings, but his abilities allow him to alter the appearances of others through touch, molding their bodies and features like clay, or just mentally influencing the change he desires. He can alter people's hair and skin color, body structure, and several other features, including turning limbs into tentacles. Mask can also use his powers in combat by making an enemy's limbs attached to their body, like that, or by closing their breathing orifices to limit their combat prowess. His powers of body manipulation later evolved so that he could alter his own flesh, but the new limits of his powers were stated to be a secondary mutation by Charles Xavier. Apparently, when Mask's body was pierced by Shatterstar's sword, Mask instinctively altered his own internal organs to help him survive, and ever since, he's been able to modify his own body. But what he can do exactly in terms of modifying his own body hasn't really been told yet, so we don't really know. Number 3, Christine Cord. Although Christine Cord, now going by Longstrike, doesn't actually have any mutant powers anymore after M-Day, she used to actually go by the name Tattoo, because her mutant ability was a chameleon skin that allowed Christine to form words or patterns on her skin which she could use to camouflage herself or convey messages. But she actually has a secondary ability in the form of biophasing. This basically meant that Christine was able to move through matter, and if she reached into another person, which is a terrifying thought, she could disrupt the neurochemistry of a person and or alter their molecular composition. Unfortunately, we won't know what else she could have possibly done because after losing her abilities and joining the New Warriors, she unfortunately did not live for too much longer. And at number 2 is Jeb Lee. Jeb Lee is one of the final horsemen of the mutant Apocalypse. He was chosen as Famine after Apocalypse watched Jeb using his drums at Gettysburg during the Civil War. Now, using his drums made Apocalypse choose Jeb as a horseman? Yes, it did, because Jeb has an incredibly unique mutant ability, which is to transmit a bio-auditory cancer that feeds on the flesh of all who can hear it whenever he makes a tapping noise, whether that be with his drums or even just tapping his fingers on a table. Jeb has a pretty, dark past, as you can probably imagine. Lee was a Confederate spy during the United States Civil War, walking the battlefields dressed as a Union soldier. Now, after returning back home, his Union Army uniform was discovered and his family was burned alive, which manifested his mutant powers. He then used these powers to go back to war, marching from battle to battle and taking the life of every human in his trail. And at number 1 is Dakin. Dakin, or Akihiro, possesses a lot of the same abilities as his father, Wolverine. He has a crazy healing factor, superhuman senses, and of course, bone claws. But what some people may not be aware of is the one mutation he possesses that neither his father nor his sisters possess. That power would be pheromone control. Dakin has empathic pherokinetic abilities that allow him to use his pheromones to manipulate the emotional state and sensory perceptions of others. He has used this to instill intense fear, happiness, depression, fascination, and a false sense of security in others. The false sense of security, though, is the definitely most interesting one, as it has allowed him to sneak up on others without them even worrying that he could be there, which is so cool. He has also used this ability to alter others' depth perception and vision, making them fight sluggishly. He can also control his own pheromones to make him basically untrackable, even to someone like Wolverine. Now there are limits to Dakin's pherokinesis, but it is such a cool ability.
Number 9. The Punisher. The Punisher in the reality of Earth 1610 was a member of both Nick Fury's Howling Commandos, who fought against the Maker's Dark Ultimates, and a member of Fury's Avengers. The Punisher's powers are basically the same as his Earth 616 counterpart. In other words, he doesn't really have any superpowers. He's mostly just a man who is really skilled in his use of various firearms. He was a trained police officer with the NYPD, so it was lots of tactical training and experience. The first time he joined the Avengers, it was to protect the Vice President against Ghost Rider, but the spirit of vengeance convinced Frank to stand down, and even assist him in the end, also helping him to escape. The Punisher would also escape S.H.I.E.L.D. custody following the mission, but would later be recruited once more by Fury after he ended up in prison. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, if you want more Ultimate lists, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Also, check out our Ultimate Marvel Universe playlist for more videos like this. Number 6. Star Brand. I kinda miss when Brandy was just like a little Star Brand baby. But of course, this is comics, and heroes can't stay babies forever. In fact, they can't even stay a baby for more than a year apparently. Especially if they're joining the Avengers, which I kinda get. Technically, the young Star Brand, Baby Selby, later given the first name Brandy, was in the care of the Avengers, not really specifically on the team, kinda sorta like their ward. But despite being one of the youngest heroes to ever be affiliated with that team, this little Star Brand also would often help the team out on missions, being so insanely powerful. Star Brand possesses the Star Brand, which grants her a great amount of basically cosmic power. She is capable of interstellar flight and flight in general, energy manipulation and projection, creating energy blasts, and technically should also be super durable and have some level of healing factor. The Star Brand's power is believed to be potentially infinite when it comes to their power levels, making Star Brand one of the most powerful members on the team, in baby form, child form, or young adult form as she currently is as of the end of issue 52 of the current 2018 Avengers series. Number 5. Ghost Rider. While Star Brand might have the greatest potential for power, and we aren't sure entirely what she's capable of just yet, Robbie Reyes is a bit more experienced when it comes to his powers. And even when he was less experienced, he actually accidentally killed one of the previous Star Brands, Kevin Connor, in Marvel Legacy. So for those reasons, I thought we should give him a bit of a boost when it comes to his ranking on this list. Robbie Reyes first appeared in the comic scene in 2014 in All New Ghost Rider issue number 1. He is an all-new Ghost Rider, just like the series claims. During a street race gone wrong, Robbie was killed and ended up possessed by the ghost who haunted the car that he was driving, becoming the new Ghost Rider. He joined up with the Avengers recently in the comics, and I think he makes a great addition to the team. I personally love Robbie Reyes, so yeah, I'm here for it. Number 4. Winter Hulk. While Jennifer Walters as She-Hulk may have joined the Avengers long ago, first joining up back in the 80s, she has gone through a lot of changes since then. One recent and major one, which also returned her to her smaller, smarter, more playful and sassy, yet still very powerful form, happened recently in Avengers comics. For a brief time, She-Hulk, then known as just Hulk, ended up becoming Winter Hulk. Winter Hulk happened as a result of Jen allowing herself to be kidnapped by the Winter Guard of Russia to try and figure out what they were up to. What devious things are they planning? In the end, they attempted to mind wipe and brainwash Hulk to turn her into one of their agents. And they kinda succeeded. Although the process was interrupted, for a brief time Jen acted as their agent, Winter Hulk. However, as Winter Hulk, Jen still managed to fight against her programming, and alert her fellow Avengers when sent to attack Namor and Atlantis. In the end, Winter Hulk was forced to absorb a ton of radiation to protect the citizens of Atlantis. She managed to discharge the gamma radiation she had absorbed safely, and as a result was returned to her original form, ultimately deciding to retire from the Avengers team after these events and return to practicing law. And now we have a new She-Hulk series that I have heard nothing but good things about. I really need to get reading my first issue. Number 3. Gregory Stark. Gregory Stark is like the evil brother of Tony Stark. He is the more immoral of the two when it comes to technology, but is more put together overall in comparison to his brother. Much less of a mess, if you will. This obviously made him a valuable asset to S.H.I.E.L.D. and Nick Fury, and so he ended up on the Avengers team. However, Gregory was also super smart, and was using his time working with S.H.I.E.L.D. to put certain plans into action that would allow him to take over control and eventually kind of rule the world, sort of. After Fury seemingly went rogue and Carol Danvers was also removed from the chessboard, Gregory was made the new director of S.H.I.E.L.D. and attempted to use his influence and nanite tech to cause chaos and war to erupt in other nations. Fortunately, he would be defeated by his brother Tony, who disabled his nanites with an EMP, allowing Thor to take him down. Still, for a time, Gregory was a pretty valuable member of the Avengers team, and later a formidable villain to them and to the Ultimates. And for that, he gets some bonus points. That's what I say. Gold Star Gregory Stark. That's what I call him. For evilness, I guess. Number 2. Tyrone Cash. Tyrone Cash was a fairly powerful version of the Hulk, and actually was the first Hulk to exist in the Ultimate Universe. He created the Hulk serum before his protege Bruce Banner was able to, and decided to use it on himself. This gave him massive strength, and he took the name Tyrone Cash, and decided to become a criminal, using his brilliant intellect to avoid capture for longer than a decade. Previously, he'd been known as the Scientist and as Banner's mentor, Professor Leonard Williams. Eventually, Cash was apprehended and forced to join the Avengers team, and after S.H.I.E.L.D. learned that he'd betrayed them, Fury had him executed. So of course, who's the most powerful? Who could it be? Number 1. Nick Fury. When it comes to the Avengers team, Nick Fury is like the Amanda Waller of it all, in comparison to the Ultimate Avengers DC counterpart, which would likely be the Suicide Squad. Nick Fury was the one to resurrect Project Avengers, and while he claimed this was done to hunt down the Red Skull, Captain America's villainous son in this reality, it is actually believed that Fury had orchestrated Red Skull's return in order to get his job back as director of S.H.I.E.L.D. and resurrect the old abandoned Avengers project. That's just so Nick Fury, I'm just saying. Nick Fury holds a lot of power, not just as a master spy who often deals in secrets, but also because he was exposed to the super soldier serum and has influence over the rest of the Avengers team as their overall leader and organizer. He's just got a lot of power. He's also like got a million plans, so if you're like, oh, I know how we'll beat Nick Fury, he probably already has a plan for if you try to do that to him. That's how good he is.
Number 10. Starbrand. Starbrand isn't so much a singular person as it is a power in and of itself. Right now, the current Starbrand in the 616 universe is Brandy Selby, daughter of Suzanne Selby, who became the Starbrand after the one before her, Kevin Connor, passed away. The Avengers stepped in and had to help Suzanne deliver little Brandy, an act that caused Suzanne to pass away and attach the Starbrand to Brandy. Since Brandy's birth, she's used the Starbrand to fly and survive without oxygen and in the vacuum of space. And she can use extremely powerful energy blasts that can take down multiple people at once. But the Starbrand itself is an incredible source of power, proven by other people who have wielded it. The bearer of Earth 723's Starbrand used the power to create music that can influence human behavior to the extent that he has unified the people of his world as a single hive mind. On Earth 541, the Starbrand bearer has conquered his world and installed himself as the head of a benevolent monarchical dictatorship, but like a good one that actually somehow works despite the lack of freedoms. Number 9. Mantis. Mantis actually got her start in comics when she used her abilities to reform Swordsman or Jacques Duquesne, which actually got her into the Avengers. Mantis's powers and abilities are more than what you may have gathered from her film counterpart. Mantis has complete control over her body, which in turn gives her peak human agility, the ability to accelerate healing through force of will, and an empathic nature, enabling her to communicate telepathically with and sense the emotions of others as psychic vibrations. She can also control her heart and respiratory rate and blood flow. Her master of the Kotati priest's martial arts, which focuses on the manipulation of nerve endings and pressure points, has enabled her to knock out beings as powerful as Thor, and her telepathic and empathic abilities are improved upon thanks to her 2 little antennae she has coming out of her head. It doesn't doesn't stop there though. Mantis also gained abilities when she merged with the Kotati, such as being able to communicate with both plants and animals and survive in space in a physically solid energy form. She can transfer herself from plant life to plant life across interstellar distances or dimensions, creating a new body from the plant life where she ends up. She can transmit and receive telepathic impressions, she has precognitive powers, and more recently she can fire powerful pyrokinetic energy blasts, form energy shields, communicate directly with cosmic beings such as eternity and death, and completely control her personal energies as well as her physical form. Number 8. Tigra. When Greer Nelson first came on the scene, she was just known as the Cat and was given powers tied to her costume. But that all changed when she became Tigra, mutating into a human-tiger hybrid in a ritual that bound her to the Cat People, which is a very silly name, but was a race of humanoid cats who were created in the Middle Ages. Now before you laugh at her for looking kinda silly, just know that in her tiger form, Tigra is granted some awesome abilities. Her superhuman strength allows her to lift over 10 tons, with her leg muscles allowing her to perform a standing jump of 12 feet. She can run at speeds of around 70 miles per hour, has superhuman durability, agility, reflexes, and stamina, and as we all know, cats have heightened senses and like to knock things off of where you carefully place them. And as far as I know, the former is the same with Tigra, whose senses are about 10 times that of a human. Tigra's eyesight can sense the infrared portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, allowing for night vision. She can more easily detect the movements of an opponent. Her hearing is so strong that she can detect a ball of tissue paper being dropped at a distance of 40 feet, and her sense of smell lets her track people. More than that, she can even detect subtle alterations in the composition of perspiration that reflects mood or emotions and is highly sensitive to pheromones. Her claws and fangs can cut through steel, and like Mantis, she is an empath able to enhance and control emotions to a degree.
At number 7, we have the World Breaker himself, the Incredible Hulk. Need I expound on this one? The Hulk has always been known as one of the Avengers' most valuable assets, and even with his weakness being that he lacks control over his actions, his power level alone outbalances that shortcoming by a long shot. Besides, part of what makes the Hulk so important to the team is that he's unhinged. If he actually had a conscience, it would be argued that he wouldn't exude quite as much strength at times, considering a lot of it is confused rage induced. In Marvel Comics Presents number 52, he destroys an asteroid twice the size of Earth, he tears the fabric of reality in The Incredible Hulk number 126, and during Secret Wars he holds up a mountain range on his own to protect his fellow Avengers. And as often as he causes problems for Earth, he has also protected it from cataclysmic events many times, like the time when he prevents an earthquake with his own hands. This hero is probably the strongest on the list in terms of brute fighting strength, and if we'd made this list about 20 years ago, he'd probably be in the top 3. But these days there are just more to come that simply deliver just a little bit more than sheer brute strength. Like Hyperion, who's in our number 6 spot. Known by some as the Superman of Marvel, Hyperion has a ridiculously impressive power set and a very complex motivation for heroism. Although there are plenty of different iterations of this hero, the one most commonly known to be an Avenger originates from a recently destroyed universe. And what's more is that he has to relive this experience in his mind repeatedly due to his non-linear light-based memory. This is important to note on a list about power because it really explains why this hero puts so much into his work as a superhero, to create happier memories for him to experience in perpetuity. But an even better gauge for his powers are his feats as a hero, such as the time when he lifts Atlantis, yes the city, and destroys it single-handedly before beheading Namor in 2016 Squadron Supreme number 1. He's also got extreme speed while flying, traveling from Nevada to Sumatran and back in less than a minute. That's speed that could contend with some speedsters, and Hyperion does it while flying. At number 5 is Blue Marvel. A very underrated and underdiscussed hero given his power levels, Blue Marvel has a stint as an Avenger, and no one really talks about it. Known to be as powerful as Thor and the Hulk, Blue Marvel has redirected enormous asteroids single-handedly, as well as sending Sentry into space with one punch. But he isn't known only for his brute strength. His matter manipulation is equally powerful and impressive, giving him the ability to transmute matter at a molecular level and harness antimatter at will. This makes him an excellent support member to the Avengers as well, giving him the ability to heal the wounds of his allies. And let's be honest, a hero adept with molecular manipulation powers doesn't often also have the strength to one-shot Ultimate Hulk or three-shot King Hyperion and contend against the Avengers after just returning from a 40-year retirement. Nor do they have Reed Richards saying that they might be 3 times smarter than Doctor Doom. But Blue Marvel does. He has all of this under his belt. There's just nobody out there quite like him. Other than maybe the guy who sits in our number 4 slot, Sentry. Although he is known to be one of the more troubled and self-sabotaging heroes in the Marvel Universe, Sentry's insane power levels and diverse power set still rank him at our number 4 slot on this list. Much like Blue Marvel, Sentry has Hulk-like strength as well as transmutation abilities, except he also deals with psionic energy as well as light manipulation. And he can also regenerate his molecules from nothing, meaning that he will always exist unless someone finds a very crafty way of combating or undoing this ability. The only caveat to all this is that Sentry has this evil alter ego called the Void, who is known to be even more powerful than he is, and is known as the being to have destroyed Asgard in the Siege storyline. And even though Sentry has struggled with mental illness causing his abilities and heroic feats to be rather inconsistent, the fact of the matter is that Sentry is one of the most powerful heroes in the universe, not just the Avengers.
Number 3, Circe. Circe is a member of the Eternals, an evolutionary offshoot of humanity gifted with amazing powers and abilities to look after the human race throughout the ages. Which is similar to, but also just a smidgen bit different from the Eternals movie counterparts. As an Eternal, Circe's body is augmented by cosmic energy, and she has total mental control over her entire molecular structure, which allows her and other Eternals to be immortal, indestructible, and invulnerable to anything which isn't stronger than the cosmic energy that augmented them in the first place. Circe has enough strength to bench 20 tons, but thanks to her telekinesis, she can augment that to lift about 25. Her telekinesis also allows Circe to fly at about 760 miles per hour. She can project cosmic energy in heat, light, or concussive blasts. She has telepathy that allows her to hypnotize weak-minded fools. She can teleport, but hates it, and she is even able to project images from her mind, which is a super cool ability. Those are all the powers we don't see in the Eternals movie though, because arguably the ability that she has the most talent in is her matter transmutation ability, which allows Circe to transmute nearly any item or being into almost whatever she wishes. Number 2, Darkhawk. The coolest name for the strangest mashup of ideas. Christopher Powell was the son of a cop and a district attorney. When he witnessed his father taking a bribe from a mob boss, he stumbled upon an amulet that gave him the ability to transfer his consciousness to the Darkhawk armor. Now this ancient Shi'ar magical armor is very cool, and it gave its user quite the set of abilities. Obviously the classic superhuman strength, speed, durability, agility, and reflexes are all here in excess, but the armor allowed for armament conjuration from the extra-dimensional expanse, and could manifest mutations from Chris's body at will. The armor had glider wings that allowed him to fly on air currents, but he gained an upgrade that brought his flight to interstellar distances and speeds. Chris is able to heal from even the worst of wounds by just switching back to his human body. The armor can generate force fields, generate dark energy blasts, give its user enhanced vision, and can switch to a bunch of different modes, going transparent, doubling up its armor, and fighting with even stronger weapons. The problem for Darkhawk is that he has this very Iron Man vibe that kind of mixes with a Wolverine vibe due to his fist claws, that also mixes with a bit of a Spider-Man vibe as well, and it all just didn't really allow him to stay relevant past the 90s. And in at number 1 is Hawkeye. Okay, look, hear me out. Yes, Clint Barton is essentially just a regular human man, but despite that, and likely because of his abilities and talents, he is considered a power level 4 according to Nick Fury's intel. Those aforementioned abilities include being a master of archery in the use of regular bows, longbows, compound bows, and crossbows, with basically perfect accuracy, able to fire multiple arrows at a single target in a few seconds. But he now also has near perfect precision with any aimed or thrown weapon. He is at the peak level of human eyesight possible. I don't know how you train that, but there you go. He is in peak athletic human condition with peak strength, endurance, and reflexes. He is an expert acrobat, tactician, and master martial artist, but listing off his abilities isn't really going to give you a proper understanding. So what has he done? In Avengers Volume 3, number 14, Hawkeye was cornered by 17 marksmen and took them all down without taking a single life. In Hawkeye Volume 4, number 1, Clint ran into a wanted criminal in a bar and took him down silently, fracturing his neck with a deck of cards.